Hello, I am the Ronin Bald, and welcome to a Twitch.tv/RoninBald live stream on Twitch.tv/RoninBald every Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern, or whenever the fuck I get up. And that's how we do it around here. Welcome to a Twitch.tv/Ronin Pawn, a pawn and roan, a moaning pawn. That's what we are doing today here. I'm gonna be bitching, whining, moaning, pissing, complaining about City of Detroit tax policies, municipal classism in the United States of the United States of the United States de America. Is what we're gonna be doing. It's a midnight cat. What's a midnight cat? What, your central et tu Brutus? Is that what that stands for? It's gotta be something like that. Hi, I'm late by 2 hours. I woke up half an hour ago, so I wouldn't start the day with a beer unless I was smart. IQ of 100 and maybe around here, people. Central European time. Oh, is that what it is? It's not say et tu Brutus? Alright. Welcome to the live stream, late live stream. I've got some documents to share with you today. I've done some writing, and I thought we'd play together with harassing the city of Detroit tax department, whoever it is in the state of Michigan up in Lansing, who manages the city of Detroit's taxation, because the city of Detroit can't be trusted to manage their own taxation because, you know, it was run by a convicted criminal, Kwame Kilpatrick, who had employed the entire city council to do his dirty work, along with all of the lawyers that our tax dollars go to pay to, you know, support and defend the city of Detroit. All of that. So between that and the city of Detroit fundamentally failing as an entity, claiming bankruptcy on a citywide level to the federal government, which who knew you could do that kind of a thing? I'm pretty sure that the city of Detroit is no longer allowed to collect its own taxes. So the people who are allowed to collect the city of Detroit's taxes, why, they're gonna get an earful in a few days. I mailed it out 2 days ago, because I live in the city of Detroit. The mail person didn't pick it up until today. You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this story. It's beautiful. It's totally Ronin Pong kind of a story, isn't it? It's a holiday tomorrow, and Friday is no one returns after a Thursday holiday, so the office is closed holiday. Ooh. Is it celebrating the day where I piss somebody off in the tax department to the point where they decide to audit someone who makes $10,000 a year or less? Because that could be a new holiday. We'll call it Pawns Day. Welcome to a Ronin Pawns Day. Here on the Ronin Pawns, trying to just aggravate. Like, basically, you know, there is a benefit to being poor and small and poor on 6 Mile in Detroit, and that's like, fucking bring it. That's what's the benefit is. What are you gonna do? That's the question that you have to ask in every situation. What are you gonna do? I got nothing to take, you know? I don't make enough money for you to garnish anything. I pay my fucking tax. They don't give me money back. I mean, the state does. But the federal government doesn't give me money back. I pay them federal, you know, taxes every year. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You gonna come and arrest me? Throw me in prison? Huh? We outlawed debtors' prisons 200 years ago or so. That was about 1,000 years after the rest of the free world had, you know, decided to rest of the civilized. But we got there eventually. What are you gonna do? Huh? What do you got for me? Oh, you're gonna love this. You're gonna love this story. I need to put myself up on. There we go. Now I'm in the corner. Hi, everybody. That's me. Is there another one that I could maybe put in? Maybe something like this. One more little Muppet dance. Jazzy. Hello, Mosaic Task Force. How you doing today? Spending $10,000 to investigate a $10,000 yearly income tax case. Sounds like government to me. I just might be able to piss them off enough to get them to step on down. Come on down to the Ronin Pawn. That's the thing is, if somebody did, that would be so great if, like, an auditor actually showed up on my doorstep and I could be like, welcome. I'll let you in just a moment. Over there's where the drug dealers used to live. I'm not sure. We just saw some cars parked in some conspicuous places. They might be moving in again. Might want to just move your car a little bit. Over here, that's the building where the fella came out and broke out all the windows because the cops wouldn't come and he was beating his girlfriend and she came to my doorstep because, I don't know, she smelled that I was a decent human being. Broke out all my windows, came through. That's where he used to live. I'll give him the tour of the things that you get for your taxes in the city of Detroit. By which I mean a functionally useless subway system, not subway, above ground train rail system down the middle of Woodward that didn't go far enough north to make it worth having built it, which was like the redeeming quality of it, and a hockey rink for a billionaire that we borrowed money against the city's funds for the schools, which are in the bottom 20% of the nation or something. And we just took it as $250,000 out of the schools. Don't worry about it. They're just black kids. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's Detroit. They're mostly black and Hispanic down there, so it doesn't. That's not what we're saying. Listen, that's not what I'm thinking while I'm doing what I'm doing. And so that makes it all right. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. I'm sure you would just as easily snake $250,000 out of an underperforming school in a white affluent neighborhood. Oh, but that situation wouldn't exist because it's a white affluent neighborhood. Right. Right. Said the white guy wearing the Asian wig. Hey, I know I'm a mystery wrapped in an enigma wrapped in a riddle. Here I stand, nonetheless, before you, ready to read a four-page response in the city of Detroit in response to a document which I received May 1st, 2019, if we're to trust the date that it was, like, printed and stuff like that. So within a few days of that, it landed on my doorstep. From the Michigan Department of Treasury City Tax Administration Department, the Department of Redundancy Department, that is titled City Income Tax Notice of Proposed Tax Due. This is a 3-page document. There are 3 pages. You can't really tell because of how bright the light hits me. But that's good because I don't need you looking at my name and address and social security number and firstborn child, that sort of a thing. But yeah, so first page, and what the first page says is, first off, response is due within 30 days of the notice date above, May 1st, 2019, dropped in the mail on the 27th, when I wrote this thing. Didn't get picked up, because I live in Detroit, so, the mail collectors people's, if they don't have something to drop off at your house, it doesn't matter if you put the flag up saying, I've got something for you to take. They're not getting out of the car for that shit. So it says, response is due within 30 days of the notice date above or the due date of return, whichever is later, blah-bitty-blibbity-blah. The Michigan Department of Treasury received your city income tax return for the tax period. Hey, I filed. You're welcome. The department made adjustments to your return, which resulted in additional tax due. If you have questions, you may contact the City Income Tax Administration at the phone number listed above. Please review your return, and if you agree with the adjustments, follow the payment instructions on the last page of this notice. If you disagree with the adjustments, which I do, and that's send a letter to the Michigan Department of Treasury, City Income Tax Administration, P.O. Box 30741, Lansing, Michigan 48909. State why you disagree, and include documentation to support your conclusion. Include a copy of this notice with your response. Okay, that's all of page 1. Is it just saying, we think you owe us a little bit more, so I get this, I see that first page, I'm like, all right, no big deal, they think I owe them a little bit more, I don't make a lot of money, so it can't be that much more. Sure, we had whatever. I don't know how you'd figure that out, because, you'd have to actually process a tax return, which that's like why I have to do it for you, is because you're too busy. You'd have to like look at stuff. You'd have to audit things. But all right, whatever. So what is it that you think I owe additionally? Go on to page 2, where I have what I'm just going to turn it like that. Maybe you can kind of see, but just generally, this is representational of it. Blank sheet of paper. And it's not blank. There's things on it. It says payment summary, payments, nothing. Tax penalty and interest detail, and then it lists 5 categories, just tax due, $130, underpaid estimates penalty, 100, deficiency penalty, 130, underpaid estimates interest, 285, deficiency interest, 19 cents. And then here, okay, on this page, just look generally where I'm pointing, return adjustment detail, it says, and then it has an area for description, as filed, as corrected by Treasury, an explanation. And then from here down to here, in this whole explaining what the fuck we're talking about area, just white paper from there down. Evil Donner Balkan subscribed at tier 1 for 22 months and the thing didn't fire. Almost 2 years. Nice, says Mosaic Task Force. Thank you, Evil Donner Balkan. Nearly no time to watch the streams due to work and other stuff. Yeah, like, it's great, isn't it? It keeps you busy. And if you weren't busy, then you'd have to come up with reasons to write letters to entities just trying to piss them off to entertain yourself. So, your life's going well. But yeah, so basically it lists the charges that they'd like to apply with no explanation in the entire rest of the page, which was dedicated to the idea, to the premise of, explaining why. And then the third page is just another blank sheet of paper with a, thing at the bottom that makes it more convenient for me to detach and issue my voucher of payment. Now, the situation rises because I waited until the last minute to file my taxes this year, April 15th, 2019, in order to pay my taxes for 2018. So I went on TurboTax and, made up some numbers because that's basically what I've come to at this point. I can't be bothered to go through line by line, item by item, receipt by receipt, and come up with... I can't be bothered anymore. So I just kind of invent some numbers that make my tax payment reasonable by my own estimation. What are you gonna do, government? And then I submit it. So I go on TurboTax, I give them some numbers that I've baked up. and then TurboTax tells me what I owe the federal government, tells me what I'm getting back from the state, which is how that usually works out. State takes care of me. I'm very surprised. I certainly don't expect it, don't plan on it, but every year, I get back the return. It's like the state's going to give you hundreds of dollars and pay your heating bill because you're poor. And it's like, cool. I didn't put anything into the system. I didn't ask to take anything out of the system either, but this is the way that it works. Fuck, all right. I'll take it. I am poor. That helps a lot. I might be able to continue, living under this roof because of that. So thank you very much. But TurboTax tells me what I owe the federal government. They tell me what I owe the state. And they tell me what I owe the city of Detroit. And then what I do, is I go through TurboTax and I click the buttons that say, pay. And then I pay my tax bill by direct withdrawal from my bank account. You put in your bank numbers and then, they take the money out of the bank account. It could also pay via credit card. There's a number of methods by which you could pay on TurboTax because the federal government and the state government, they exist in 2019, whereas apparently the city of Detroit exists in 1982 and has just stopped, and it's just going to stay there. City of Detroit requires payment, and probably this has to do, I'm guessing, with the fact that the city of Detroit is no longer allowed to collect its own taxes because it filed bankruptcy. And because it's just a completely non-functional government. So their taxes have to be paid by cashier's check or money order. And I don't want to give away, the jokes and tones and indictments that are going to be in this letter that I wrote to them. So I'll try and just leave that out. They accept cashier's checks and money orders exclusively in 2019, which begs the question, are they the last customer of, CVS? Are they the exclusive reason why you can still go into a post office and get a money order? because I gotta tell you, I don't mail anybody a money order. I don't write a check even the entire year. In fact, the first year that I moved to Detroit, I opened a new bank account, and one of the instigating factors of that was that I had a bill with the city of Detroit, maybe taxes, I don't recall, but I was allowed to set in a check. So what I did was I opened up a new bank account with a bank that was nearer to me than the bank that I was using at the time, because I knew they'd give me like 1 or 2 free checks without me having to order it, which would cover me for 1 or 2 years, because they're the only people I write checks to. City of Detroit. It's 2019. Hang on, let me just, I want to show you something, City of Detroit. Just pay attention, okay? Just keep your eyes on the screen and your ears open. Okay, Google. What is the square root of 260,593?
Square root 260,593 is approximately 510.483.
You can't accept electronic payment. In 2019, I have a supercomputer in my pocket I can talk to, ask it a question like that, and it'll tell me the answer in its own voice. And you're using cashier's money orders. Okay, City of Detroit. No, it's all right. I don't want you to stress or tax yourself. Might as well stress and tax me and the rest of the people who live here instead. So yeah, they sent me a thing saying, we've adjusted your taxes. Please give us a detailed, and attach your documentation for why you would disagree if you do happen to disagree. And then they give me no explanation. This comes about because I did not pay my City of Detroit taxes because I waited until the last minute. And City of Detroit taxes, you're going to have to mail that shit. You're going to have to go to fucking CVS or someplace that actually still cuts a money order or a cashier's check. And, you got to get money out of the bank or get it at your bank. Your bank usually costs more, which is fucking ridiculous. You're a client of your bank, and it tends to cost you more to get a money order or a cashier check there. Go down to a post office or some corner thrift store that's got a money order machine, hand them the money, and then here's something that I really hate about the concept of money orders and cashier's checks, okay? People don't like to put, and a lot of and businesses just don't usually accept this for a lot of reasons. People don't like to put their bill in there, because here's the thing. If that letter gets lost, stolen, something happens to it in transit, reaches the place where it is, and somebody opens it and goes, ooh, $100, puts it in their pocket. That's it. My $100 is gone. My debt has not been paid. Whatever it is that I was paying you for, it's just gone. And cashier's checks, money orders, they improve upon that by the idea that you have to put the name of the person who's the recipient on it. And that means that if somebody opens a check, if somebody opens the letter and pulls it out, they couldn't just take it and cash it unless they know how to wash the ink out of a check and keep the rest of it. But anyway, it makes it a little bit more difficult for you to rob, and just so it deters people from going to the effort. It's not just $100, shit, nobody's looking, put it in my pocket. Here's the thing about a cashier's check money order. I've never had to cancel one and try and get my money back. But I imagine that if I can cancel one and get my money back, then that kind of defeats the concept of the cashier's check money order, because it's also this interstitial document that exists between just writing a personal check and sending actual money. It's not actual money, which means not everybody can cash it, but at the same time, it's not a check that will be drawn on your bank account once it receives, which means you've already proven that you have the money because you paid the money to create this piece of paper that now represents the money. So, if I can cancel it, if I can say, I don't know, they didn't receive it, let's cancel it and give me my money back, that kind of defeats the concept of the protection that you get for the person who's receiving the cashier's check, that the money's already here, it's already been proven, it's, now I can write you a cashier's check, put it in the mail, then go back to the place I bought it and said, I want to cancel that and give me my money back. So I don't know how that works, because it seems like if you can cancel one and get your money back, then why not just write a personal check? You know? I don't get it. I don't want to, basically, I don't want to ever have to go through the process of trying to cancel one, because I suspect that maybe you can't cancel one. You put the money into that piece of paper and only a certain person can get it back out because you wrote their name on it. And if I put it in the mail, just like if I put a $100 bill in the mail and I send it to you, then if it gets lost, damaged, stolen, whatever, that's it. My money's gone. My debt's still out. It's the same as if I'd put a $100 bill in there. It just is a slight deterrent on people not putting it in their pocket when they realize what it is, like they would with a $100 bill. I don't know how it works, but I'll tell you what, I don't feel comfortable using this archaic means of payment. I don't feel comfortable translating actual dollars into one piece of paper that's got someone else's name on it and only they can get it back, and no matter what happens, it just seems like it's gone. I don't know. Maybe you can get it back. I don't know. I always keep my receipts on all the cashier's checks and money orders that I've ever written, but I have no idea what I would do with those if shit went afoul. And because I haven't had to actually interact with them very often in my life, because they are growing, with every second that I continue talking, a more and more archaic form of payment and transaction, haven't had to do it a lot. So, but yeah, cashier's checks and money orders is all that they accept, which is the reason why I didn't pay them on the day of the tax obligation, because they had no method for me to pay them on the day of the obligation, had I not started the process 3 days earlier, and okay, I'll go to the bank, I'll get the money out, then I'll take the money to a place where I can get a money order where it doesn't cost me $5, and I'll get the money order, and I'll get an envelope, and then I'll and then I gotta go and find and print out what is at the bottom of this letter. The first year that I was a citizen of Detroit, it was actually, I went to a library at tax time. They had all the tax documents there, and I said, I need the little, thing that you send in with your taxes so that they know that this is the taxes. They had to go online, look it up, print it out, and charge me, a nickel or a dime for the process of going online, looking it up, and printing it out, because the city of Detroit had not issued them with the little slips that you can actually pay your fucking taxes. It is like the city of Detroit doesn't want to be paid taxes. They've made it so, the deal is, governments, when it comes to handing out money, they take the same tack that corporations take. They take the tack of the rebate scam. If you ever gone into a store and seen that something is, it's 30% off, it's $10 less, $20 left, you get up there, you grab it, go, this is a good deal. Then you get to the counter and you go, wait, why am I paying this? And they say, oh, it's a rebate. You just send the thing in. The concept behind the rebate scam, and every rebate is a scam, doesn't mean you won't get your money, but the whole concept of it is a scam, because the concept behind it is, instead of just lowering the price and, getting you to buy it cheaper, what we'll do is we'll create a arduous, difficult system to maneuver through, and we'll gate the process in such a way that what we're hoping is a lot of people will buy the product going, ooh, $10 back, and all I have to do is send in a slip, and then some percentage of people won't send it in, which is why it's a scam. They could have just lowered the price and then sold it to you, and they could have lowered the price less than the $10 off and then sold it to you, and that would be honest, but instead they're going to drop $10 off because they know some portion of the people won't actually file that rebate, and it'll all even out in the end. So it's a manipulation of people based on what is called gating, or at least what I call gating. I don't know what they call it, but I call it gating. And the idea behind gating is simply, if you have a process, a procedure, something that someone has to do, the more complicated, the more arduous you can make it. It's not necessarily complications. It doesn't have to be hard to penetrate, but it's just the more steps, the more, and I have to do that, and I have to do that, and then I have to wait, and then I have to do that. The more people are going to drop out of any system, and that's just basic, sociology. This is basic understanding of how animals and human beings behave. Put me at the beginning of a long and arduous maze and tell me get to the end, I might, walk into it for a little bit and then be like, yeah, fuck this, and then turn around and walk out. Because that's just sane. It's called sanity. It's called not wasting your fucking time. So what governments tend to do, what the U.S. government, state government, Detroit government tend to do is if they've got programs where you can, like, take money out of the system because you are in need or you're trying to prove that you're in need, food stamps, that kind of thing, then what they'll do is they'll create the most arduous, most difficult to move through set of gatings so that, and the idea here is that only the people who really, really need it will drag themselves across the hot coals that we've laid down in order to claim the money that we set aside to help these people. And I think that that's a really bad way of doing it, but whatever. So that's how you set things up. When you don't want people to do something, you make the path treacherous and arduous and long and annoying and a hassle. And at some point, like, I tried to file for food stamps a year ago because I was getting, or maybe not a year ago, maybe like 4 to 6 months ago, I was looking down the road and seeing, my income is not looking good in the future, and I've already been, kind of on the edge of things. I think I might have to bite the bullet here and actually file for food stamps. So I filed for food stamps and the, whatever they call it, the Department of Human Services in Michigan, DHS is what they call it. So I filed with DHS. They claimed that my paperwork, I didn't submit paperwork that I did, and had, like, highlighted each page on the, like, I sent them their sheet that said, send us this, 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 or this, and I highlighted each thing I sent them that, covered their thing. They sent me back a notice saying, you didn't send us anything, so fuck you, and you can't reapply for a while. So then I call up my caseworker, and she doesn't call me back, and so I call her again, and she doesn't call me back, and so I call her, and I'm leaving, like, voice messages, and eventually I get to, like, calling her and then calling the main office operator line so that I can try and leave a message with somebody to tell them my caseworker refuses to actually, work my case. Hello? Anybody in there? And when I get to the operator line goes to fucking voicemail. So the caseworker, you call her, it just goes to voicemail. You call the operator's desk, and the operator's desk just goes to fucking voicemail. There's no way to penetrate the system. I left a voicemail with the operator. Guess how many people called me back ever? None of them. So after, like, spending a couple of weeks off and on calling and trying to poke and prod the system to get them to actually wake up and do the job that they're supposed to be doing, I just gave up. I just said, fuck it, It's out there to help, but it's been made so impossible to actually acquire the help. Fuck it, I'm wasting my time and stressing myself out when I could just instead, starve. And so that's what I did. I just figured, if things go wrong, they go wrong. I reached out, I tried, I did all the things, I sent them all the paperwork, I made duplicates and copies and mailed it to them, and then they claim it didn't come in, and then I'm making phone calls, nobody will return. That's gating. And that's how you keep people out of claiming things that you've offered them. And it's a very strong and very often used method for municipalities and governments to keep people away from the things that they claim when they're on the, campaign trail that they put into place to help people. It's municipal classism, basically, but we'll get to that. Anyway, that's how you do it. You gate people. You make it hard and difficult for them to, like, acquire the free money that you've made available if they, meet certain standards. What Detroit has done, because Detroit is run by Gibbons, is they've actually gated the process of paying them. And I can see how you can kind of get in a flow of creating a whole bunch of arduous, difficult systems to move through in order to keep a poor population who actually needs help from being able to acquire that help, because fuck them, they're just blacks and Hispanics mostly. I have to assume that's what your mindset is, and even if it isn't, it's what you're doing, so it doesn't really matter to me what you're thinking while you're doing what you're doing. What you're doing while you're doing it and who you're hurting while you're doing it is what really matters. But they apparently have got into such a rhythm with creating arduous gated systems that they actually just kept going when it came to trying to get people to pay them tax revenues. Oops! We made it hard for people to give us money. That's the opposite of what we should be doing. So, yeah, it's actually quite difficult to pay City of Detroit taxes. It's not even very clear when you go through TurboTax that you have submitted your city taxes. You get a, readout for, it tells you very clearly, the federal government has, here's your federal government taxes and here's your state taxes. City of Detroit taxes are sort of rolled onto your state taxes, so they don't mention that. And then, you get open the document PDF. You come here all the time. Here's one for free.
Im hard do jet money, I mean wait what, who are you, who am I?
I don't know. But thank you, RMAJ, for the subscription. Somehow your 23-month subscription did not, it fired the overlay that Evil Donner Balkan's subscription didn't. The fuck, man. Twitch, I don't know what you're doing. Maybe they took some hints from the City of Detroit, and it's arduous, and there's trepidation involved in trying to get the subscription notices across to the bot. I don't know, man, but one way or another, Detroit has made it difficult to pay them, which is not what you want to do. If you're in the business, if you're trying to get paid, you might want to make it as easy as possible, and that would include acknowledging the existence of things like electronic forms of payment, which, by the way, cost nothing for the city. You might say, well, the costs of, doing a credit card transaction or doing a bank transaction, first off, bank transactions can be free. Secondly, credit card transactions, what the federal government does is if you're paying them by credit card, they bill you for the charges that they will receive to, process your credit card transaction. So it's all been done before for decades, in fact, Detroit. So if you can hear me back there in 1982, we're doing this thing called electronic forms of payment now. Look into it. If you can figure out how that supercomputer in your pocket works, what you want to do is just say, okay, Google, how the fuck do we accept electronic payments? And it'll answer it for you, and it'll give you the square roots of whatever you ask for. But yeah, so this has come about, I presume, because I did not actually pay my taxes on the day... on the day that I filed my taxes, which I did not pay on the day that I filed because I can't, as the City of Detroit wants me to pay them in barnyard animals, and Caesar's coins, and just archaic methods of transacting currency. Yes, RMAJ, post-war U.S. 1950. I was going to ask them if they would accept Confederate notes, because that seems to be about the era that they live in. And the mentality, because, when you're going to take $250,000 out of the school system in Detroit, the taxes that have been set aside for the school system, which is failing just miserably, bottom, I don't know what percent out of the nation, the City of Detroit's public school system is, and you're going to snake $250,000 out to build a hockey rink downtown in order to help fund the building of a hockey rink downtown that a billionaire who can totally afford to build the fucking hockey rink downtown without your $250,000. Like, at some point, the question is, so you're claiming you're not racist, right? That's what you're doing? That's the claim? Because everything you do seems to look like, there's a white billionaire in California who wants to build a hockey rink, and we're going to make a deal with him in order to steal $250,000 from, black kids in a ghetto, which I refer to as the entire city of Detroit, 120-some square miles. We're a post-slavery ghetto down here. We're going to steal $250,000 from kids in order to help underwrite a billionaire's construction of a hockey rink, while making agreements, by the way, in order to, earn the favor of that billionaire, so that he'll build his stadium in our city that basically guarantee it that we'll never see the city will never see positive tax dollars or just positive money out of the building of that stadium. Because whenever you build a stadium, it doesn't matter whether you're Detroit or somebody else, the agreements that you have to make to get them to like build the stadium in your city basically say they don't owe you taxes, they don't owe you naming rights, they don't owe you just about anything. And if you say, no, we're going to collect taxes on you, they say, okay, we're going to go to another city and build it there. So basically economists have been telling, cities for quite a long time, you don't do that. Don't build stadiums and don't underwrite their costs, because it doesn't work out for you in the long run. And if you all stand up and have balls about the matter, then they won't be able to, say, well, we'll just go to another city where they will bend over and let us put it in their asshole. If no one's willing to bend over and let them put it in their asshole, I mean, unless that's, unless you like that kind of a thing. But, if you all have, I don't know, self-respect, then they can't do that anymore. And then, it would make sense to build a 6 to 8 block, to just demolish 6 to 8 blocks of your city where you could have businesses and residential, where you could have collected tax dollars and had people coming and going and things like that. And instead, knock it all down so that you can have the best possible facility for full-grown adults to play children's games at a professional level. Which, hey, I'm a speedrunner. I acknowledge that sports are cool. And that there's an incredible amount of skill there. But when it comes to whether or not I get my home team, playing in my home city or in the city that I think that they should be playing in the best possible facilities that they could possibly have, with this just Olympic-sized swimming pools, and after the game they get into the tub and and it's beautiful and it's lovely, because they deserve it, because they've worked really hard to get where they are and they've sacrificed a lot. So what we're going to do is we're going to take millions of dollars away from the children of the city of Detroit that was going to go toward their education costs in the schools that, even with that money that we're taking out, are already in the bottom performing schools in the nation. We're just going to steal some money from them in order to make sure that, Havlicek has a good place to just put a heating pad on his thighs after the game, because they've worked hard. They deserve it. Hockey professionals are our future. They're our future. No, actually, the children are. And, seeing as a poor post-slavery ghetto of a city, opportunity for black children and Hispanic children in this area, kind of, sort of just trying to make things even there at that point, aren't we? Still trying to catch up to just the ideas that were in the Constitution, that all men are created equal, except for the blacks and the Jews and the gays and the fucking... No, we got there. It's not accept anymore. So now what we need to do is not what we're doing right now. In Denmark, the public transport was cut in half for 4 months, meaning that everyone had to pay 50% more to get a guaranteed numbered seat. To get compensation, you have to, between August 1st and September 30th, buy a pass for 59 days. Then after that pass has been used up, which has to be used up before December 30th, you can apply for a refund of 30 days on a web page that will open up September 31st, explaining how to apply for it. So people buying yearly or half yearly, which is most common, and then it just cuts off on my end of the screen. But yeah, I get it. The fucking gating. The gating. And that's what it is. It's rebate scam. Somehow Detroit has managed to set up a rebate scam gating system for them getting paid, which is, possibly why they're not getting paid. By me, definitely. But Paul, only if she's hot, then I'll let her do it. But still, I like getting bent over and pegged, sure. Fuck the children, not like that, but also, yeah, they should have good schools, yeah. You have schools that provide any education that lives up to any standard across, it's just fucking ridiculous. You drive a half an hour in any direction out of the city, and you find a school that, performs. And then within these boundaries, within these borders, it's okay that they don't perform, that they don't educate kids, that they don't provide opportunity to a generation that has sadly been born into a post-slavery ghetto of a city that nobody gives a shit about. And it's like, how is it that on that side of the border, people give a shit, and on this side of the border, people don't give a shit. And I would argue that the hallmark distinguishing factor is the number of black people and Hispanics in southwest Detroit that are the population here. You know, if you'll just look at this hot map that I haven't prepared, but that I totally could, you'll see that there's sort of a green zone of safety and police presence, and just around Woodward is a corridor, and then down around downtown, and then out toward along Jefferson, which is along the waterfront, and then over toward Grosse Pointe, that kind of a region. There's a safe zone where it's like you actually have, you know, city services and police protection, and then as soon as you move into the areas where people actually live in this city, because the people who actually live in this city are primarily black, suddenly you call 911 and it goes to busy signal. Suddenly you call 911 and it doesn't go to busy signal, and you're waiting for the police for an hour and a half. So where the black people generally are and are living, the people who actually, you know, are the city, that pay the taxes if we bother, because at this point, why would anyone bother? But, you know, the people who actually live here, they don't get the services. But the people who are coming in from Oakland County, the you know, affluent, primarily white people who are coming down to the city to enjoy a little holiday, we've created like safe paths for them to travel on down Woodward. You know, you can come down and everything's protected, it's good and it's gated, and we're watching very carefully to make sure nothing happens. And then the moment you get out of the literal like alleyway of white safety that exists in the city of Detroit, it's all just fuck it, Wild West. Fuck it, that's not what we're here about. Fuck it, that's not what we're concerned with. And you can say it's not racism, it's capitalism. To which I would say, okay. Because, yes, yeah, this is what capitalism creates, you know? If you say, but it's not racism, it's just capitalism, it's just there's where the money is. Right, yes, correct, I agree. Do you think there's a problem with that? Well, no, because capitalism are good. No, you see, the evidence that capitalism are not good is the evidence that if you're going to say it's not racism and it's capitalism, well, then you got a whole generation of people growing up without educations in a city where people are being shot and drugs are just completely like easily transited from one place to another. Police completely tolerate, you know, drug houses. They know where they are. They harass them once every 6 months and go on about their business. You got all that going on, and then you got where the money's coming in, we protect that. What we have is basically, you know, Baghdad after the shock and awe campaign, where we've created a green zone of safety, and then don't go outside the green zone or else you're probably going to get fucking killed. And we literally have cops on bikes downtown late at night surrounding Greektown, riding back and forth, and their main job, riding little circles around Greektown, because Greektown has all the casinos in it, and the white affluent people like to come in from Oakland County and you know, have themselves a little bit of fun on the just at any time of week, because it's a casino, so people are fucking addicted to it because it's gambling. But we have bike cops riding around Greektown to catch white people who've, you know, started drinking and they're having a night and they're gonna like walk off into the city and like, let's go to a restaurant somewhere, not down in Greektown. And they'll start walking a couple of blocks and then they'll run into a bike cop who stops them and says, the fuck are you doing out here? You can't be here. You see those houses behind me? Do you see them? No, you don't, because we did the lighting so that you can't see them. But trust me, they're there. And inside them are people who are ready to fucking stab you and take your wallet. You are white, you are affluent, you need to turn around and you need to go back to the fucking green zone right now. And I say that not as like a, you know, exaggeration, but as someone who, I've got an aunt who likes to go down to Greektown, and that was her experience. They you know, like 2 a.m. or something, they're at the casino. Casino's open all day, you know, all night. So they decided, let's go out, let's get a little bit away from Greektown, let's find a place to eat in Detroit. And they walked 2 blocks away, a bike cop stops them and says, what are you doing? You need to turn around and go back to the safe area. Because if you walk 1 street north, you know, more, you're dead. We can't protect you anyway. You're completely, you know, There is literally a bubble created for the safety of affluent white people coming in from places that aren't Detroit to spend their dollars at the casinos that is not afforded to the people who actually fucking live here. And is it because they're blacks and Hispanics? Mostly? No, it's capitalism. Okay, then capitalism sucks, right? You can't say, well, it's not racism. Quit calling it racism. Okay, what are we going to call it? Classism. That's what we're going to call it, because that's what, is going on. If you're going to deny that the reason why it doesn't matter why black kids have a shittier education, why Hispanic kids have a shittier education, why it doesn't matter that we can pump taxpayer dollars into building stadiums for billionaires in California so that full-grown men can play children's games for the amusement of people who don't live here, because the cost of going to those stadiums is too much for, the people who actually live in the city of Detroit to afford to do. Like the cheap seats at the fucking Little Caesars Arena, $80. $80 for the cheap seat. Then you're in the arena and there's an event going on. Would you like a drink or some food? We all know what arena prices are on drinks and foods. It's $9 to $10 a beer. It's the same for like a slice of pizza or a hot dog. So like the people who actually live here are not the people who are going to those games, because the people who live here are not making the money to go to those games. Outside of the green zone, I mean. The place where it's actually safe. The place where we've got the monetary bubble of affluence. You've got money, we'll protect you. The people who actually live here, who are the, surviving remnants of post-slavery ghettoization, they don't have the money to be blowing it on watching, full-grown men play children's games in an arena that, by the way, since they built it, they have not been able to fill it. They've got the Pistons playing there, which is our basketball team, and they've got the Red Wings playing there, which is our hockey team. And I hear the Red Wings are doing okay on turnout. The Pistons are doing so shittily on turnout that they actually repainted the chairs of the stadium so that it wouldn't look like on camera they were empty. I don't know how they repainted them. I've just heard it, my dad told me. That they repainted the chairs so that it wouldn't be as obvious when you're watching a game that's taking place in Little Caesars Arena down in Detroit that there's just nobody watching, because all the chairs were like bright red or something. I don't know if they if they painted the chairs like different colors so that you couldn't tell. It looked like, just a bunch of different color t-shirts, or what they did to try and distract people from the fact that the stadium is empty. But like the whole premise of building the stadium that is arguable and that makes it not fuck black people, fuck poor black people in Detroit. The argument is that what we're doing is we're taking money out of the schools in order to build the stadium so that people will come down, so we'll make money off of the stadium, and then we can, have more tax revenue than what we took out of the schools in order to fund the schools and all the things that need to happen in Detroit. Now, that doesn't work. Even when things like are going well, even when your team is drawing full houses, economists tell you, yeah, that doesn't work because of the deals you have to make with the people who build the stadiums about not taxing them, and they get to keep the revenues for this, that, and the other thing. It doesn't really work out 99% of the time in the first place. It's super extra double doesn't work out if you can't get people to actually come to that stadium, which is harder to do when you're making them drive into a post-slavery ghetto to watch the game, and the people who live in the post-slavery ghetto can't afford to go to the game because you've set the prices in such a way as to try and get white, affluent, yuppie suburbanites to drive down into your ghetto. You set the prices for them, the cost of going to a game for them. So you can't pack the stadium. You can't pack it unless everybody's really excited and they're doing really well, and then you will, but that's not going to be the state 99% of the time, which is why 99% of the time stadiums are a losing, economic investment for a city, which is what all economists will tell you. And what I'm sure all the economists tried to tell Detroit when they were going to build this stadium. But I'm sure it was very popular with all the people who are big sports fans. I want my fucking team to come down here, and those guys, they work really hard, and they deserve the best facilities we can give them, and those black kids, fuck them. Because Gretzky, who hasn't played it, that's old, but I don't know who any of the new people are. So, Havlicek, why, he is blocking he's the best goalie in the league, Patrick Waugh, he's just knocking the ball, he needs to have just, fucking massages and shit, it's just a really nice, room to go back to after the game to relax, which won't even, half the season he'll be on the road, so he won't be using it, but it should be there, and if we have to take a decent education away from all of the children who just happen to be blacks and Hispanics mainly in Detroit, fuck those kids. Havlicek, Pavlicek, Fuvelcheck, Fuvelcheck, they need a masseuse. Yeah, no, that's not racism. That's not classism. That's just good common sense. We cannot prove children are the future. We could all have spawned into existence a moment ago with our memories. Are you sure that you were ever a child? I would argue more that we cannot prove children are the future because we have no guarantee of the future, especially considering the sort of state of the global warming and the rising tides and the winters that just keep getting longer. And I would argue that the reason we can't say the children are the future is because we may not have a future as a species, so why waste our time on the children when we could be lavishing full-grown men playing children's games as a profession with the best they could possibly have. It makes perfect sense to someone, somewhere. You are accepting the universe is not you. To blame capitalism, one must accept it. All right, sure, whatever. Capitalism, if accepted, is like royalty, inherited and dependent on who your parents are, with rare, statistically insignificant exceptions. That is true. That is absolutely true. Capitalism, in the way that it has come to function in the modern world, is just an extension of monarchy, where the kings and queens and princes and knighthood and the dukes and the viscounts and all of those folks, they lived lavish lives of luxury, while the subjects of their kingdom, broke their backs and watched their children die of disease and all, and just lived in squalor and shit and that kind of stuff, in part to provide them, the dukes and the counts and the viscounts and the kings and the lords and the ladies, with all of their luxuries, their lavishness. And the fact that our slaves in 2019 aren't on the same shores as the consumer base does not mean that slavery has gone away. The fact that your goods are produced in Malaysia and Vietnam and Taiwan and just, South Asian places, generally speaking, where apparently people just don't give a fuck, that does not mean that the slavery doesn't exist. It's just been put around the corner, and I really, people who are hardcore vehement capitalists who, want the fucking free market to just save us all, just let it go, all regulation go away and it'll work itself out. Like, we have regulation right now, and we have slave camps in, Vietnam that are being run by fucking Nike, at least in 2012. I think it was 2012. Nike was found with basically a slave labor organization. Walmart is found time and time again with basically a child labor organization. And, there's these arguments that people want to make that, make them seem like, well, I'm more thoughtful and forward-thinking than you are, because I've realized that the children who we're employing don't have an opportunity for education over there, and so the fact that we're willing to employ them means that they can bring money back to their households, and their households, lives can be better, and so, we're making the best of a bad situation in a nation where education isn't provided. To that I reply, fuck you, you're an ass. Like, you're just taking advantage of a situation that exists somewhere. You looked for that and found that. And if you actually gave a shit about that, you know what you could do with all your money and your influence and your power and your ability to say, we will build factories and employ people in this country if you do X? You have the power and the authority, along with our government, along with, the people of the United States of America, if we were to hold them accountable, to put pressure on these nations to come up to standards and provide children with educations and provide minimum wages and not allow employers to pay less than the living wage on the ground in those nations. But it's convenient for you to use these little half-step, half-logics, just kind of not bridging the gap, but getting enough into the gap to make a stupid person go, oh yeah, well, I guess you're right. No, you're not right. You looked for the situation where you could get away with that, and now you're there. And if there exists a situation where you can get away with it, you'll be there. If we wanted to actually, I don't know, give a shit about people, no matter where they lived or who they were, we could make it better instead. You know, the influence and authority that that sports team owners use on cities, that FIFA uses internationally when they decide they're going to, hold a World Cup and we need you to build us a bajillion-dollar stadium that we'll use once and then never come back to. That pressure that these companies and these organizations, these corporations put on, our governments and shit like that, they could be putting that pressure on them to abide human rights if it were in their best interest. But it's not in their best interest. And why isn't it in their best interest? Because capitalism unrestrained is greed. So if I can find somewhere where I can have slaves sew fucking labels into the collars of mass-produced by robot fucking textiles, more's the better. That's what I'm gonna do. It's there's no argument in the we're making the best of a bad situation. No, you have authority and influence and power and money to actually make the best of a bad situation. Not just make the best of a bad situation, but change the situation so that it's better. But you choose not to because it is in your best interest to make the best of a bad situation instead of making the situation better. And the same can be said for the American people, because I'll tell you what, right now, if we set up on our borders the idea that imports, if we put up, the fuck are they called? When you import anything into America, if we are at that time aware of human rights violations of workforces that you have that involve children, that if you are paying people less than the living wage where they live, not, where you're shipping it to, but where they live, less than the living wage, if you're underemploying people so that you don't have to pay them the living wage, so that, you've got 500 people all working 10 hours a week instead of having 100 people working 40 hours a week, that kind of thing. I did the math wrong there. If you're doing any of those things, we'll just add the cost that it would have costed to employ those people in a reasonable way to your import fees. And then, by virtue of the fact that it actually costs you the same amount or more, in fact, it needs to be more, because it's all about, if it's the same amount, then fuck it, we'll just keep doing it the way we're doing it. If it costs you more to land your goods on our shores and then pay duty fees and taxation fees and import fees, because you're using child labor and slave labor in foreign nations, then you will stop doing that. We have the authority to do that as the American people. Our government has the authority to do that on our behalf. And also the corporations themselves have the influence and authority to do that in the nations where they're doing business. But no one is. Why? Because the corporations have the money and have the influence and have the power, and they don't want things to get better. They want them to be shitty, so that they can have a slave labor force, which means that they use that power and money and authority that they could exert on foreign nations in order to make the situation better and not be involved in human rights violations constantly. They use that money instead to buy governmental support in legislative offices, to line the pockets of senators and House representatives, and to pay them to get elected and put them into the positions so that they can maintain at the governmental level this system that is completely fucking broken, that I think, I would like to believe anyway, that the majority of the American people, and I can't say this after Trump being elected, but I would like to believe that the majority of the American people would be behind the notion that, yeah, I don't, even if it's a little bit cheaper, I really don't want to buy socks and t-shirts from Walmart that I know an 11-year-old who should have been in school had a hand in making. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're just that, maybe Americans are just that fucking selfish, egotistical, don't give a shit who has to die for me to get cheap fucking textiles, me to get cotton socks, 12 for $1. I don't give a fuck who's, suffering where in the world, so long as I don't have to look at them, so long as they won't land on my shores. Maybe that's the That's the idea that they have. And by the way, where that idea exists, you might want to look at September 11th, 2001, because that's what happens, friends. That's what happens. The idea that, well, we'll just put it over there. We'll put the problem over there. We'll fuck a society and a generation of people. We'll have our slave camps, instead of them being a bunch of black people on our continental shores, we'll have them be a bunch of Asian people somewhere where we can't see them and where they, being poor and slaves, can't come back to us. Well, what's going to happen? You know, if you've looked at history before, then what you'll notice is poor people fucked over eventually get together and show up on your doorstep. In other words, your chickens do come home to roost. And if you think those buildings dropped because they're crazy fucking Muslims with their fucking 40 virgin bullshit religion, no, that was a method by which people who were fucking sick of their culture being co-opted, of their land being robbed, of the value of their nation being stolen by Western and European and American forces, managed to rally enough people together under religious doctrine and things to, strike back. They didn't, pick us out. There's nothing in the Quran that says, and America, the towers shall fall, that kind of stuff. There wasn't this is who you should attack and this is why and this is when. People don't usually walk up to you in the street and punch you in the face unless they know you and you did something to them. You get it? If you think terrorism lands on our shores as a completely random act, there are lunatics in this world who will act alone and do things that make no fucking sense. That is the truth. When people organize together and coordinate and synchronize events, that's more than one lunatic. That's more than one person whose logic doesn't make sense. That's a group of people who know that they have been wronged, coming together and eventually growing the fucking balls to give you a little bit back of what you have been given them. People like to pretend terrorism is, there's no justification for it. There's no this, that. No, there is justification for it. I mean, there is where it came from anyway. And, you kick somebody in the shins every single day of their life. No matter how long-suffering they are. I'm a fucking Buddhist. If you hit the Buddha in the head, you smack the Buddha in the face 3 times, he'll fucking kick you in the nuts. That's how the saying goes. Something like that, anyway. You kick somebody in the shins every single day of their life, eventually, they will shoot you in the face. And you will deserve it. People don't seem to connect that tissue there. That, people attacking, European, just Western sources generally from these, other nations. Oh, that's just, these people are fucking weird and they're crazy religious zealot nuts. There's an angle of that. There's an aspect in there. It's definitely what the old clerics who are trying to manipulate people into helping them will play on. The idea of your obligations and your duties and your morality and your decency. How can we possibly stand here while all of this is happening to our people and our brothers and our children and our nation? They will play on that, and they will use religion in order to get you there. But fundamentally, they would have no one to talk to if the people of these nations didn't know America, didn't know Europe, and didn't feel that America and Europe were fucking them in the ass without their consent and in a non-pleasurable way on a daily basis for decade upon decade upon decade. So, you can pretend like having child labor on foreign shores and literally in Nike's case, having third-party contractors hire people who were migrants to the nation, to Malaysia or Vietnam, wherever they were operating at the time, migrant workers who needed green cards to work and then stealing their green cards because now they're literal slaves. They can't go work anywhere else in the country. Oh, and we got your passport, which means you can't go back where you came from and get a job either. So now you're literal fucking slaves. You can pretend like that has no effect, like it's no big deal, like nothing's ever going to come back on you. But, if the worst thing that happens is that someday all of those factories just fucking burn and the employees, not the employees, but the management for, on the ground in these nations for Nike, all, just barbecue in their lavish buildings. If their corporate offices on these grounds just burn and people hang them in the streets and shit like that. If the worst thing that happens is that, we'll be lucky. Because the people who deserved it will have gotten it. But we're all kind of deserving of it, because if we allow it to go on, if we allow them to operate, if we can't be so, so bothered as to invoke a little bit of import tax on people who operate on foreign shores underneath the flags of our nations, waving just in the wind, this is where I come from, and now I'm fucking you. If we can't be bothered to do anything to stifle that, and in fact we encourage it, and in fact we promote it through our electoral processes and our governments and our general policies and our general politics, what we think is reasonable and what isn't reasonable. If that's the world that we create, then that's what's going to come back to us. The French Revolution wasn't a bunch of crazy French people getting angry about nothing. It was poor people who had gotten sick of the rich people being in a hurry, and so telling the drivers of their carts to, go faster down the narrow streets, and having their children crushed, run over, and killed in the streets by the noble lords and ladies of the land, who then threw some coins out the window and said, "Keep your fucking kids out of the street, I'm in a hurry." It was them getting pissed off at that shit and deciding, hey, you know how to make a really heavy blade, right? Could we mount it really high and then drop it? Yeah? Jacques! Let's do it, Jacques! It's what in Buddhism is called karma. It's what in physics is called thermodynamics. It's that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That the energy that goes out into the universe does something. It does something. If the energy that you're putting out is pushing human lives down, pushing people's face into the mud, the energy that you're going to get back is that of people with muddy faces who are very angry and who maybe are willing to burn you alive. And you will deserve it. And there's no standing back and terrorism is a cowardly. No, it's not. Are you kidding me? The fucking balls it takes to, from the other side of the planet, organize a, we're going to go to this other place, we're going to hijack planes, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's horrible, the people who died. You know what else is horrible? The people who died before the people who died. It would be, we would honor the memory of those who died in September 11th, in the September 11th attacks, and those who died in all of the military operations and all the deceitful government and CIA shit that has gone on in the Middle East that has fueled the will to commit terrorism on American shores and on European shores and things like that. We would honor the deaths of our people and the deaths of their people if we did anything whatsoever to correct it. But so long as you're not interested in doing anything whatsoever to correct it, then, at least from my perspective, the people who died on September 11th, they're in the same category as the people who died in, Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan under operations led by Western allied forces or individual you know what I'm talking about, the US and Europe and the people in power who have been manipulating that region for all that time. So they're in the same category. What is that category? Well, that's up to you, isn't it? But they're the same people lying in the same mass grave, and you can't say that the people, working in the towers did nothing wrong unless you're going to say that the people in those nations also did nothing wrong. But they died at the hands of forces that were operating underneath our waving flag. And then our people died at the hands of forces operating underneath a flag of resistance. A flag of, no, fuck you. We're going to strike back in the only way that we possibly can. So if you want to honor those deaths and maybe, like if you want to be angry at me for bringing it up and making what you might think is light of it, I'm not making light of it. I'm making serious of it. The people who have done nothing and who advocate doing nothing and who advocate the perspective that those fucking Muslims and, these fucking terrorists, they're all insane. They're the ones making light of it. They're the ones making light of it. I'm making complete serious of it. So if you want to be angry at me for, dishonoring the memory of those who died in the towers in those attacks, you can go do that. You'll be an idiot. Like the people who you should be angry at are the people who have done nothing, who have decided that more violence is the solution, that more attacks and more creating more angry people on the ground, especially angry young people who have lost parents and siblings and, friends and wives and husbands and lovers, to continuing aggressive acts, those of corporate entities, not just militaristic, These issues don't just derive from military action.
You need to live in a van down by the river.
It's not just militaristic, it's corporate as well. It's monetary. It's the manipulation. I mean, it's mostly monetary. That's where the roots of the fucking thing are. The roots of it are oil pipelines and how we can make money and how we can control oil industries and fucking government officials who want to have more control over foreign sources of oil so that they can better secure their fucking re-election campaigns, because people vote more positive for the person who's in office when the oil prices are low and shit. Like, it's all self-interest, self-vested. Who gives a fuck about these people who live over there? I don't see them. I don't know them. Whatever. Just do what you gotta do. Dirty work, clean work. I don't fucking care. And then when it lands on your own shores, you're gonna pretend like, oh, well, this is an outrage. What? Because someone somewhere didn't care who you were? Or what happened to you? Because fuck those people? Is that the outrage there? You been to Walmart lately? You bought basically anything from that store? Because, that's kind of exactly the same thing, saying, well, fuck those people, I don't care. You got them basically enslaved in working in buildings full of mold that are about to fall down, that don't really have any floors on them. It's just dirt, and there's no fire extinguishers. And they're not being paid a living wage and all like that. Fuck those people. They're over there. I got mine. And then you're going to be angry at people in another nation who sent warriors, who sent, people to attack us on our shores. Because why? Because they said, fuck those people. I don't care. Fuck them over there. Do you maybe just see a little bit of there's just a hint of hypocrisy somewhere in there? It's hard to, but I kind of can almost smell the hypocrisy, like it's fucking barbecue sauce on the holiday weekend that we just had, wafting through the air, filling your senses top to bottom. I'm just going to read some of the latest comments, because if I go back, God knows. Entropy. We may try to sort energy into work, knowledge, and products, but they will dissipate. Nothing will last in physics. Everything will be the same, perfectly homogeneous. Everything will also exist forever. Bear that in mind. And it seems a big, I don't want to get into physics today, but it seems quite a large leap to go to the heat death of the universe and just assume that that's the way it is, because if the heat death of the universe is a thing, then why did this happen in the first place? Like, the explosion that created this universe is counter to entropy. If we imagine a universe where there was nothing, and there was energy, but that energy was all concentrated into a single point, that was exactly the opposite of entropy, right? All of that potential energy locked into a single point, waiting for a chance to explode. And the question is, how does it get there? And until you have an answer, maybe don't go predicting the end of the universe. But regardless, in terms of physics, just bear in mind that everything that is always will be. Everything always will be. You say, but red shift heat death, yes. Even in that unlikely instance, as I consider it, everything will still exist. It'll just be in a state that's not substantially interacting. Like, even at heat death, things will still be interacting. Like, the only way that you get to a universe where things don't interact is where space-time itself is spread out so thinly and so that everything exists in its own pocket of subspace temporal, which is a state that, like, is imaginary. You have to imagine that you have to segment the entire universe and say, this little particle is separate from that little particle. Like, everything will still interact. The idea is merely that it will be an unsubstantial, insignificant interaction, but it will still exist and it will still be interacting. And the idea that it will persist in that state is stupid and short-sighted. It's stupid and short-sighted. How does the universe start if entropy is where it ends? You know, if entropy leads it to heat death, then how do we get to the beginning of it? Because there has to be a history before it. And you say, well, there doesn't have to be a history before it. Okay, well then, you know, you might as well be talking about God then. God magicked it up. But I don't want to do that today. We're doing taxes. I don't want to talk about that. Pawn is the word. My guess, a computer simulation. 1 point with all energy, put in physical constants, run Sim 7000, have fun watching. That's as good a theory as any that I've heard, especially the end of the universe and heat death. The notion that, like, the universe will expand and then not contract. Like, it's one thing to say entropy and everything moves out, but then you've got gravitational, like, you got an absence of a central gravitational force, which would naturally bring the energy and particles and whatever you're going to call it back together because they all have a collective gravitational force. And right now we're talking about dark matter and dark energy that is causing the opposite of what we expect to be happening, which is that the expansion of the universe would be slowing under its collective gravitational pull toward the center. So we're just, you know, there's an energy out there. We don't know what it is. We don't know why it is, but it must be there. So we're going to call it dark energy. Well, dark energy then also applies to heat death. So as dark energy dissipates and becomes uniform and stuff, then doesn't that mean necessarily that that gravitational pull that we already expect to be pulling things back toward the center would then kick in when the dark energy ceases to, create that force moving outward. If that energy dissipates, then we know how gravity works, and gravity will suck it all back together. It's just really stupid perspective to take that I know how the universe will end because I've read the latest science books I'm following the latest quantum physics. When, 10 years ago, we were all convinced that the universe would expand and then collapse, you know? Like, the results that show us that dark energy, that something is going on that's keeping the universe from collapsing the way that we expect under gravitational force, they are 10, 12 years old maybe. So to decide, oh, well, now we know, now we've figured it out. You hadn't figured it out 10 years ago, but the people of the same mindset 10 years ago would have been saying, now we know, now we figured it out. It's just religion, you know? Look up at the sky and it's raining and you go, God is crying. Now we know. Now we figured it out. And then 50 years later, you know, after you kill a bunch of people who are saying, no, actually, it's just moisture in the air that collects in the clouds and falls back down. After you murder some of them at the stake, eventually somebody convinces everybody that, no, it really is. It's rain. And then they go, oh, now we know. Now we... We'll see. We'll see. So I have been, ranting on socialism, classism, capitalism, and the state of everything, including apparently the nature of the universe, of existence, and time itself now, for quite some time. We're going to take ourselves a live stream break, and when we come back, we will actually read the thing that that's been on screen waiting for me to read. My letter to the city of Detroit, in response to its proposal of additional taxes due, which I've decided to disagree with because, well, you'll have to stick around to find out. 7-minute live stream break. Come back. Don't join me. Join me with the pause. No advertisements. Out. Hello, I am the Ronan Bourne, and welcome back to a twitch.tv/Ronan Bourne live stream on twitch.tv/Ronan Bourne. We're going over there to the screen where I have been just gearing up for. Apparently it takes me over an hour to gear up for reading a 4-page document, which I've written to the city of Detroit and which has been, well, mailed. It's going to them. So just imagine the fallout of this letter is going to be. This is a letter that I've written to the city of Detroit in reference to their proposal to increase my taxes due. And yeah, having given an hour and a half of just speech about capitalism, society, and everything, let's just read it, get it out of the way, and then we'll address the continuing details, because it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Hologram 1, however, said, I reckon the universe created itself. To create time, you have to have a start point. At the end of the universe, time collapses and creates the universe. We're trapped in a loop. That would kind of tie things up neatly. It'd be a very Dickensian kind of a thing, and I actually quite prefer that version. It seems to make sense to me. Oh, shit, we run out of space on Drive M, which is where these live streams are being recorded. Not that we needed to record this one, but if I don't go and clear out Drive M a little bit, then we're going to keep getting blings constantly, which is, you know, just magnificent, if you ask me. I think, which one of these recordings has my really good, all right, skip that one, delete the other one. Good, we got more space, you won't bling at me. Yeah, I don't know, because, like, heat death is very reasonable. I'm not shooting down heat death. I'm just saying we don't know. What is it? No matter how long we toil at the wheels of spirituality or at the cogs and gears of science, the nature of existence, we'll never know it. That's a really bad paraphrasing of a really nice quote that if you ask Nobit for wisdom enough times, it will eventually come up. But that is basically where we stand. Now, as a Zen Buddhist, you can know what you need to know, but you have to sit on a mat for several thousands of hours. You don't. You can just know it. It's just hard to, like, let yourself know it, is the principles behind Zen. But we're not going to do that, RMAJ. It's okay. I ain't going to that. But yeah, heat death, entropy, all that thing, it's like, the longer and deeper that you look into it, the more that you stare into the abyss of it, from any perspective, you have to, like, acknowledge that, yeah, as Hologram 1 is alluding to, we need time. Like, time has to exist. We have energy in this universe. That energy had to come from somewhere, and that energy had to do things, and it all requires time. And does time begin when the energy just suddenly emerged into existence and explodes outward, and then we see all of these things, and now we're trying to predict the end of it? And if you're going to predict the end of it, what you really want to know is the beginning of it. And just the supposition that the Big Bang, or rather the sudden expansion of energies outward, that created our universe is in fact the beginning of anything is a giant supposition to make. You know, we are observing our universe from within an explosion that is still taking place. So to look around and say, well, all the energy seems to be coming out from that area and it just keeps expanding out to that area, is exactly what we'd see from this tiny little place in the midst of an explosion that is still occurring. You can't really know anything from where we're sitting in the universe, basically. You can't know it through those means anyway. All of the records of the history before the explosion are invisible because of the violence and nature of the explosion itself that we are still sitting in the midst of, while it is still, to some extent, exploding and swirling around and doing all of the things. But just ontologically, the closer that you get to the beginning of existence, you have to ask, well, was there something before then? And if there was, and what is the nature of time? Time being completely fucking subjective. From an individual perspective as a human being, you perceive time differently depending on your brain and depending on whether or not you've taken mushrooms or smoked some weed. Every time I smoke weed, I experience a distortion of time. I experience time slower than usual. I'll sit and I'll watch 6 minutes of something as a YouTube video while I've got water boiling to make noodles in the other room, and I'll suddenly realize, oh shit, those noodles, and then I'll run out and I'll look at the clock and I'll realize, oh yeah, I started that 6 minutes ago. The water's not even bubbling yet. So from our own unique individual perspective as human beings, time is completely subjective. And then atop that, all of our science tells us that time is subjective as well. Depending on how fast you're moving or slow you're moving, and which means everything has its own perception of time within the universe. And the longer and harder you look at the depth of this rabbit hole, all you can really see is that everything we know is a dream within a dream within a dream. It's all illusory. It's all an illusion. It's all perspective necessary. You have to have perspective. Without perspective, you can't make an accurate measurement. Without knowing where you are, or just deciding that you're at point zero, and then you can measure everything outside of you. But you have to decide that you're at point zero, but you're not at point zero. And you can decide that the other thing's at point zero, and then measure yourself in reference to that, but then you're deciding that's at point zero, and it's not at point zero. Everything is, we are the dreamer observing ourselves. We are the dreamer dreaming ourselves and observing ourselves as the dreamer dreaming the dream. And I don't even know what that means, but that's closer to the truth than anything that anyone can possibly say, even as I don't know what I'm saying. Because I don't know what I'm saying. There is no, hard scientific, maybe there is. I don't know how we get to it. I don't know how we get to an answer. And I don't think we should waste our time doing it. The photons blasting across the universe at the universal maximum speed limit do not care.
奥赛西斯 W 伊鲁宁奥特 OF 斯帕斯德赖夫 M 埃弗里恩普雷帕雷 TH 尼福斯伊斯哥宁托科拉普斯诺
It is going to collapse soon, no. What? We know nothing. We know nothing. We can't really know anything. And that's sort of the thing is, why do we feel the need to know? The photon is the photon. It doesn't worry that it doesn't think about it, doesn't question the nature of itself or the nature of everything that's rushing past it at light speed. If the photon is the zero state in the universe, then the rest of the universe is moving at light speed past it. And that is exactly as valid a perspective as any that we, from our ball in the planet look out and say, no, the light it's going really fast. No. The light is staying perfectly still, and we are moving at light speed toward the light. Equally valid perspective. Everything is perspective based, and the truest perspective that exists is one that just is. Doesn't try and decide for any other thing or for itself what it is. It just is. Doesn't worry about it. Be the question that makes your answers disappear. Or no, what? Be the answer that makes your questions disappear. Yeah, that's it. Stole a song line there. This is my letter to the Michigan Department of Treasury, City Income Tax Administration. I did not put Ronan Pawn there. I've just corrected that for the fact that I'm going to show it on the live stream. As requested by this document that you sent me, saying that I owe an extra $100 plus, and we'll get on to that. As requested, I am writing to notify these offices that I disagree with the adjustments made to my City of Detroit taxes due for 2018. A copy of the notice I received is included herein for your review, as also was requested in their document. You will note, in your review of the notice I received, the absence of any explanation of the adjustments applied to my tax filings. An entire sheet of paper stating the city would like to have an extra $100 plus $1.30 plus $2.85 plus 19 cents, followed by a blank itemization section where some explanation is intended to be provided and isn't. As I am asked to explain my disagreement with these charges while providing detailed documentation to support in response to this meaningfully blank sheet of paper, I find myself at a disadvantage, having no surety what it is you're talking about. I'll admit to being strongly tempted to send you back a similarly blank sheet of paper, indicating that I've also adjusted my owings but to zero while requesting your documentation-supported response of disagreement to my utter lack of explanation why, turnabout generally being accepted as fair play. But for now, I'll speculate That underpaid estimates penalty, which is on this sheet of paper, seems to imply that you'd like an extra $100 for having not received the funds on or before tax day, a process made that much more difficult by the fact that the city of Detroit only accepts tax payments in the form of chickens and sheep, cashier's checks and money orders, the modern equivalent in 2019. My federal and state taxes were filed and paid on April 15th because functional governments that want to get paid, realizing that's more likely if the payment methods requested aren't societally arcane, accept direct bank transactions and credit card payments. We're calling them electronic payments since Detroit is apparently the last one to hear. That said, I can't be sure underpaid estimates penalty is a late payment fee. First, because it doesn't say late payment fee, which would be an unambiguous language that leaves no question with any reader. And secondly, because the next listing, deficiency penalty, expresses the same sentiment while being equally vague and evasive in language. Even more so, when I consider the interest applied to each of these individually undermines the concept of one being a one-time penalty and the second being a continuing non-payment amount. It is fundamentally impossible for an entity to charge interest on a penalty that doesn't exist. Interest requires a term. We were talking about time earlier. Here we go. On the day of any charge, there is no lawful right to collect interest on that charge. That right is accrued with time. This notice was received just 2 weeks after April 15th, tax day 2019, yet you've billed me for what calculates to 2.85% interest prior to notice of the existence of an alleged penalty, if that's what this is, and before so much as half a month has passed. This being a supposed penalty which, by virtue of your own notice, stands within a period of dispute. The attempt to collect interest on a penalty fee, which is in and of itself an abnormal and legally questionable practice, interest on a late charge that doesn't actually exist yet, as it currently rests in arbitration, paired with a lack of any explanation in the fields reserved for just that, leaves me guessing why you want to nearly double my tax obligation, plus a random interest amount within just 15 days of the due date. This uncertainty is further aggravated by my inability to find within the City of Detroit's tax code any specification of a $100 penalty or a 2.85% interest to accrue separately on the unpaid portion of late payment fees applied, which is extra double odd, seeing as the continuing interest on unpaid taxes is explicitly set at 1% within that code. How is the money we agree I owe Detroit for taxes less valuable than the money you seem to assert I owe in penalty fees? Does it cost you more for me to owe you a debt that I had no prior obligation to pay? And doesn't the arbitrary $100 on a $130 tax bill cover these imaginary non-expenses? Where I cannot locate stipulation of this $100 and its own special interest accruing in the code, neither can I locate, obviously, any specification therein of which of these clumsily disambiguated and restacked debts would receive repayments first. If I submit a partial payment, what does it go to? The higher interest charge or the lower interest charge? Surely Detroit's city government wouldn't implement repayment practices made illegal for private lenders during the Obama administration, that being burying higher interest debt beneath lower interest debt. But if that's not the case, why the two different interest rate values? Why would the interest be higher on the penalty fee than on the unpaid tax owing? Why would there be an interest rate on a penalty fee in the first place? Or an interest rate on an interest rate where the deficiency penalty is already an interest rate? Why can't I find reference to these figures in the tax code? Is the City of Detroit borrowing practices from subprime predatory lending? In any case, as I sit, I have no answers to these questions, a situation created when no explanation was given by these offices for the additional charges in the first place, despite an entire page and header section being dedicated to precisely that usage. Until these offices respond with an explanation, preferably including a section and subsection citation of the code that says you're entitled to an extra hundo on a $130 tax bill at an arbitrarily assigned 2.85% interest, and then to charge 14.6% interest on the 1% interest on the deficiency penalty, I ask that all interest accumulation be negated and paused until this arbitration concludes. In the interim, I'll offer you a deal. This is going to go over really well with them, I think. Send me a bill for the 130 we agree I owe, plus the 1% monthly interest I find explicitly stated in Detroit's tax legislation, and I will mail you 3 sheep, 2 pigs. I will pay you $131.30 in whatever archaic monetary device you are capable of receiving back there in 1982 within 30 days. However, if this charge is a late fee with interest applied on a late fee, and it is your intent to bill me for it, please read on. In 2016, I was assaulted in front of my home here in Detroit and followed back to it by a drugged-up woman-beating maniac who'd skipped parole in Indiana, moving here to avoid the inconvenience of an effective police force. The details of these events are arduous, incredible, and last over a week. They involve me calling Detroit's 911 no less than 16 times, with police responses taking over an hour and a half on each of multiple events, in which the 11th Precinct Detroit Police failed, first by choice and later incompetence, to in any way protect either myself or the woman this wanted criminal was continually assaulting. For brevity's sake, it culminated in 11th Precinct Police finally arresting him on the 3rd night of 911 calls, after he'd broken several planks of wood across my face in the streets, broken all the windows out of my home, stepped through one of them, and threatened to kill me in my own dining room. The officers that night, Detroit's finest, failed to file any paperwork after arresting him. The next shift didn't know who he was, and released him back into my neighborhood less than 14 hours later, forcing me to abandon my home, later retaking it with a shotgun ready to kill the man because there was neither justice nor security and no one to call in this city. As one of what I presume are the few citizens of Detroit's 11th Precinct who actually bothers paying their city taxes, whom in turn has received a new hockey rink downtown, the price of attendance being too expensive for the majority of actual residents to enjoy, erected with tax dollars borrowed against Detroit's nationally averaged bottom-performing school system, provided in place of, say, an adequate or accountable police force, 911 services that don't go to a busy signal when you call, or any meaningfully effective legislation to reduce the number of blighted and blighting homes with which the property I own here is surrounded. As someone who is self-employed, scraping by on an income of about $10,000 per year, living in a city that more often resembles Beirut circa 1982, than one sharing a border with the peaceful streets and well-timed, thoughtfully civil-engineered traffic systems of Canada's Windsor, as a poor person in this roundly ignored 120-square-mile ghetto, policed by just 2,000 some officers, where my tax dollars are spent on erecting more and more elaborate forms of entertainment for affluent non-residents to better amuse themselves on weekends spent downtown, while those who live here and pay those taxes are assaulted and die in the streets from the unchecked violence and willfully tolerated drug traffic, the question arises, why should I pay Detroit at all? I pay the federal government, and I know that coast to coast the basic welfare of the nation at large is funded. I pay the county of Wayne, and I get to own my home and have the trash picked up each Tuesday. I pay the city of Detroit, and a billionaire gets a new stadium underwritten at the expense of children. Downtown gets another casino at the expense of a citizenry who can now be addicted to crack and gambling. It's an optional question, but if you are intent on billing me, why should I pay it? I know the ineffectiveness of Detroit's justice system up close and personal. What are the actual consequences of me just ignoring Detroit's tax bill? What are the consequences that actually will be enforced? Not the ones that hypothetically could be, like how assaulting a woman, leaving her bruised and bleeding and pleading for asylum on a neighbor's doorstep at 3 a.m. hypothetically gets you arrested. No, I mean what actually happens in Detroit, where the officer in command tells the battered woman that if they have to arrest her boyfriend, they'll just shoot him to death instead, and then asks if she really, really wants to press charges. I've got nothing to garnish. I'm my own employer, so they'd have to go through me to intervene in my wages. I don't get a federal tax refund to pilfer. I pay them, and so long as Detroit's police let convicted felons beat people in the streets to avoid having to file arrest paperwork, then forget who they've arrested when they finally do the job, I gotta tell you, I feel pretty safe joining the thousands in the city who just ignore Detroit's attempts at what is inarguably taxation without representation. So, what's the downside to me just throwing up one finger here? We both know Detroit hasn't earned my tax dollar. If I could find a lawyer who'd take the case, they'd end up owing me 6 digits or more for what happened here in 2016. Morally, I'm in the right, but just on a purely utilitarian level, does this city have any actual real-world means of collecting on these owings? Or in any way punishing me for not paying them? You let me know and bear that in mind as you consider my offer to pay you the $131.30 that the tax code actually says you're entitled to. All too sincerely, Daron and Pawn. May 27th, 2019.
Call the fire department, Detroit just got burned.
Indeed, amazing. And the funny thing is that this letter will be going to Lansing. Why is it going to Lansing? Why is it going to the Michigan Department of Treasury? Why not to, Detroit Tax Administration? And that's because Detroit is not really a city. It doesn't handle its own taxation. The reason why it doesn't handle its own taxation is because it wasn't able to pay. It filed bankruptcy with the fucking federal and state governments as a city. And I believe it was that point that the state said, okay, if we're going to write off all of the debt that you owe us, then we're going to collect your taxes from now on. So the people who will be reading this are people who don't live in Detroit, who don't know what it's like to live here, who have no vested interest in the city of Detroit, which is the best way for government to function, don't you think? People who don't live in or experience what it's like to be citizens of the area that they're representing. It's going to Lansing, where white-collar people, probably white-collar people, will sit in an office and decide what to do with this letter, having no idea what the fuck it is I'm talking about. I do want to say before we go on that, because I noticed this late in the drafting of the letter, so I put it in there, but it's only understood if you already know what's in the letter. And since it doesn't really appear on the camera, I'll just indicate to you that there are 5 lines of how much money they claim I owe them. One is the taxes due, which are $130, and that is what we agree on. That's what I filed my taxes for. The next says underpaid estimates penalty and says $100 even. Beautiful, round figure that, isn't it? Then there is the deficiency penalty, which is $1.30, which by simple math I deduce that's the interest that is accrued when you don't pay your taxes on time. Every month, I looked this up on the day of filing the taxes because I knew I wasn't going to be able to pay them. So if you don't pay your taxes every month, 1% interest on the amount due is added to the amount due. So that's the deficiency penalty, 1% interest on the owings. Then there's a 4th line that says underpaid estimates interest. So now they're charging interest on the $100 penalty fee, and that's $2.85, so I guess it's 2.85% interest on the penalty fee, which is, I'll pause here to say, it's kind of fucked up, isn't it, in the first place? Kind of weird and fucked up. You don't see places usually do that, charging interest on a penalty fee, and especially if you are going to charge interest on a penalty fee, charging it in the first month. It is one thing to have, like, an obligation on the citizenry to pay their taxes by a certain date, and then they don't, and so you start collecting interest from the day that they should have paid it. It is another thing to have the non-payment register a penalty fee, which you then immediately add interest to, because the penalty fee didn't exist until the action of non-payment. And you can say, yeah, but it all occurred on the same day, and I get the argument. I get how you can do this in math. I also note that there's like 1,001 reasons not to, starting with don't be a dick. Don't try and bury your citizenry under so much debt that they just decide not to pay you anyway. Because if your goal is to get paid, then that's kind of, you wouldn't want to make it harder for them to pay you by lumping so much money onto their shoulders that they can't afford it anyway. So as long as they're going to owe you, might as well owe you more than less and just stop paying entirely, which is where I sit right now. That's what I'm considering. Now, I'll pay them the $131.30, but if they get back to me and say, no, we want $200 and some because you couldn't pay us because we maintain archaic methods of payment, money orders and cashier's checks only in the year of our flying car lord 2019, Yeah, I'm just thinking, fuck it. Just don't pay him. What are you going to do? You can't stop the guy on my street who's beating a woman, no matter how many times I call 911, no matter how many nights you come out, to the point where I have to, like, basically get, to the point where I have to actually, not basically, to the point where I literally go out, buy a shotgun, and come home with the full intent of murdering him the moment he gives me an opportunity to do it, where I won't have to go to federal prison. And, you know, if I have to go at least before a judge before it, well, what are you going to do? Somebody's got to take care of this. The city of Detroit isn't. So yeah, the idea of charging interest on a penalty fee, okay. I mean, you've already specified what the interest is on tax dollars, and now you're going to have interest on a penalty fee. A little sketchy. Let's double the sketchiness, because underneath underpaid estimates interest is the deficiency interest, which is 19 cents. And I did the math, 19 cents on interest on the deficiency penalty, which is $1.30, is 14.615, something like that, percent. It's 14.6% interest. So that's coming out of left field. We've got a 1% interest rate. We got a 2.85% interest rate. Now we got a 14-point-some% interest rate that really, I can't find any reference in the tax code to the $100 or the 2.85. I sure the fuck can't find any reference to a 14-point-some interest rate. But here's what gets really interesting about this. We've got the taxes due, and we've got the deficiency penalty, which is 1% interest applied each month to the taxes due. And now we've got the interest on the deficiency penalty, which is interest on the interest on the taxes due. You're charging me interest on interest. And my question is going to be, if you can do that, surely I can do that as a private citizen in my own public affairs, right? I can charge interest on something that's due. And if I can charge interest on interest on something that's due, then I can charge interest on interest on interest that something's due. You know, because the fundamental concept here is that this guy owed me $130 on Tuesday. He didn't pay, so I'm going to charge him 1% interest on that. But you know, he didn't pay me on Tuesday, so I had to charge him interest, which means he should have paid me that and the interest. So he owes me interest on the interest. And you know, since he should have paid me the interest on the day that it was due, he should have paid me I could have been using that money to make money if I would have had that money, so he owes me the interest on it that I could have made if I would have had the money. So he owes me the interest on the interest, and he owes me the interest on the interest on the interest, and the interest on the interest on the interest on the interest on the interest. And we can just keep going, which is why this isn't legal. It's why you can't do that in the law. You can't charge interest on interest. That's what interest is. Now, I guess what they're trying to do is claim that a deficiency penalty is not interest, even though it is 1% accumulated on the owings each month, which is, you know, the definition of interest. And then they're going to charge interest on the interest at another arbitrarily decided percentage amount. 1% on the owings is what's written in the tax code. I can't find evidence of the 2.85% on the penalty that doesn't exist in the tax code either, as far as I can find. If you can find it, let me know. I sure the fuck can't find 14.6% interest on the owings. It's, and that's how we come to, you know, in the title of this live stream, the notion of municipal classism. Because at this point, first off, the penalty fee is completely unrelated to the amount of money that was owed. It's just around $100. $100 on 130. Boom, here you go. That is nearly doubling my tax obligation as a poor person in the city of Detroit. So you don't care whether I can pay this, whether I can afford to pay this, whether or not, you know, that extra 100 is going to mean that I don't eat this month or something. You don't mind. Like, if it's a percentage penalty based on the amount that was owed, then there's like a moderate decency to it. If there's a set figure, the way that banks do when you like bounce a check or something, $35, that is of a reasonable amount that covers, you know, you can argue that it covers costs and it covers, you know, the other party that didn't get the money and the bank's process of having to deal with their bank and stuff like that, you say $35. It's a penalty. It also covers our cost of having to deal with this bullshit that you made for us, that sort of a thing. When you just throw $100 on a tax bill, that's a traffic violation now. That's a ticket, is what you're doing. And when you're ticketing someone for not having paid you on the day that they were supposed to pay you, while maintaining systems of payment that do not accept personal check, cash, credit card, direct deposit via bank, when you don't accept any electronic forms of payment, when you don't accept any direct forms of payment, when you'll only take these arcane cashier's check money order things, and you're a governmental agency, like, this is multiple levels of, fuck them. Multiple levels of, fuck them. You have a population here that is a post-slavery ghetto, as I say as I allude to in the letter there, and as I've been saying on this live stream, and you're just trying to bury them under more and more and more debt, arbitrary amounts, arbitrary percentage rates, interest rates on interest rates. We're going to charge you for the interest that you owed us, charge you interest on the interest. It's just fucking ridiculous. If they can do that, then I can do that, right? And if they can have a 14.9% interest on a 1% interest, then can't I hit the legal maximum of what a lender is allowed to do and have like a 26.9% interest rate on something you owe, and then apply a 26.9% interest to the 26.9% interest on something that you owe? Wouldn't that be also something we could do here? It's interest on interest. They're blowing my fucking mind, basically. And since they are just trying to, gut and eviscerate the poor population of Detroit, who suffers under the complete lack of reasonable, societal, civilized CFS, brain fart moment, incoming. Fucking functions of society, 911, being able to call them, cops, they call and they come, fucking houses that are just falling down, blighting around me. I got a drug house across my street that is now gone. And by the way, we're noticing that there are cars in our neighborhood that used to be around that are coming back around, so maybe they're going to set shop back up again. But the drug house was here for 2 years. The cops would come out once every 6 months like fucking clockwork. They'd toss the house, they'd leave, and 30 minutes later the drug place would go back into operation. They wouldn't be back for another 6 months. I have like a police force that willfully tolerates known drug distribution locations. That doesn't come when I call them. 911 numbers that go to fucking, busy signals occasionally. Violence in the streets. I live in a city where every New Year's Eve, it strikes midnight, and what you hear are tens of thousands of citizens coming out of their homes, firing fully automatic weaponry. Not exclusively, but some of it fully automatic weaponry into the air. I live in a city where we have more murders than there are days in the calendar year. Per year. More murders than there are days, and more people dead of gun violence in the streets, I believe. Double check my stats if you really need to know for certain. But I believe that's true. And then just across the river in Canada, Windsor, and the river's about that big. On a map, anyway. It's like 1/8 of a mile, 1/16th. We go over a little bridge and we're in Canada, bada bing bang boom. And if they have one death by gun in the year, it's front page news. It's a big story for weeks. Oh my God, somebody got killed by a gun. But they're not restricted on purchasing guns. It's Canada. You can be a hunter. Lots of people have guns over there. It's not like they don't have guns. They just don't kill each other with them. And possibly because, there's a lot of reasons, and I don't think this is the biggest one, but one of those reasons possibly includes that they know if they did kill somebody, it would be a big deal and there would be consequences. One person dies that year, it's a big thing. There's a big, it's a huge investigation. One person dies overnight in the city of Detroit to gun violence, it's a good day. Just one? All right, we got through this. High five, bump it, everybody. We got through a night and only one person was shot to death in the streets of Detroit. Cool. Let's not even investigate it. Fuck it. And that's not like an exaggeration either, because the investigations that go on into shootings, because there are more than one per night per year in this city or somewhere around there, like they're not intensive, let's find this person and take them off the streets kind of investigations. You know, they're, oh, it's another body kind of investigations. Go through the motions. We don't have all day. There's only 2,000 police in this city to patrol 120 square miles of population. The city of New York being 1/7 the size in like square mileage, or something. You know, it's 1/something the size in square mileage. It's much smaller, and they have 30,000 police. Now they have a much more dense population in that area as well. We're down to like 600, 700,000, I think, in the city of Detroit, in a city that was built for like 2-3 million. But, you know, 2,000 cops, not enough. To the point where I will call the 11th precinct a bunch of fucking coward, you know, yellow, lily-livered pieces of shit. These men that came out on the night that all this was happening across the street with this girl, they go up into the house, she lets them in. He starts shouting at them in the attic, I'll fucking kill you. It's going to be suicide by cop. I'll fucking kill one of you before you. I'm not going back to prison. And they stand outside. Some of them in the hallway to the attic deciding what to do. Some of them outside. This guy breaks parts of his window out and throws glass at the cops that are standing on the sidewalk below, which is attempt to commit murder against a police officer. You're throwing glass from a second-story window at a police officer below. If it connects, that might kill them. These officers, knowing that he had battered his girlfriend, and they personally having been, attempted assault with intent to kill, with deadly force, that night, decided at the end of the night, let's just go home. They manipulated the woman who'd been battered, taking advantage of battered woman syndrome and her situation, and said, you know, we're either going to fucking kill him, who is your boyfriend, he's been beating you up and everything, but, you know, they know, the battered woman syndrome, you still love him, even though they're beating the shit out of you. We're either going to go upstairs or we're just going to start shooting because we don't want to, because we're too chicken shit. There's 5 of us with guns and we're too chicken shit to go into an attic with a guy who's throwing shit at us and, you know, just knock him out and put handcuffs on him. Or, you know, aim low, shoot his dick off like should be done. No, we're just going to go up there and we're going to start shooting. We're probably going to fucking kill him. Do you really want us to be here? And they manipulate her into letting them go home. After he's beaten her, crime number 1. Crime number 2, attempted to kill police. They just going to walk away because they're coward, little lily-livered fucking yellow pieces of shit. And then number 3, if they ever would have done their jobs and run a warrant on his name, which his girlfriend gave to him, they would have found out that he was wanted for 2 crimes in the city of Detroit and had skipped parole in Indiana. So there's just grab bag of things, reasons to do their job that they all didn't. So are they cowardice pieces of shit that you know, don't deserve to wear the fucking badge or that uniform? Abso-fucking-lutely. When it comes to how they got there, it is, you know, living and working in a justice system where there are not enough of you and too much of the bad guys. And you don't have funding and you don't have time and you end up not responding to calls that aren't like murders, and you end up only going to the murders and filing the paperwork at the bare minimum because you got another murder to go to, because there's no ability to apply force of justice on the streets in a way that the people will, you know, recognize that there are actually rules and laws here. It's the wild fucking West, and you're that one sheriff in all those movies that, like, you know, bad guy rolls into the town and the sheriff just kind of waves to him because he knows he can't do any fucking thing because he's the only sheriff and he can't take on this guy's, you know, posse. The underfunding and understaffing of Detroit's police has made them into chicken shit, lily-livered, coward assholes who don't give a fuck, because how can they give a fuck? And why would they? If the people running the city don't give a fuck. You know, basically our police force would have to go fucking vigilante justice and just start killing people, and then we really are in the Wild West in order to do what they're asked to do at their levels of staffing. So as I acknowledge that it is in some degree not their fault where they've gotten to, I don't pretend that they aren't fucking chicken shit pieces of ass, that they actually do deserve the badge and they're just in a bad situation. No, they're shit. They're awful. They're horrible. They don't do their jobs. They cover each other's back when it comes to all of the things that they shouldn't have done or should have done but didn't. You know, when I tried to like get justice for myself and for this woman by contacting Internal Affairs and the Office of the Chief Investigator, I got fucking nowhere. Stonewalled, brickwalled by the city. I couldn't get anywhere on that. Why? Because they're making excuses for each other for what they shouldn't do, and it's situational. You know, it's because they have to, in quotes, and I don't argue that they kind of have to. What else are they going to do? You know, it does come back to the city of Detroit choosing to spend money building stadiums and fucking casinos instead of, you know, funding the police department and trying to get the drug traffic under control and trying to make sure the 911 lines are always open and there's always someone to call. And when you do call them, there's always someone to respond, doing something about the problems. It does come back to that, but that doesn't mean that the people on the ground making these choices aren't responsible as well. And I say that because I say that with the backing me up fact that this event ended at my house, this week-long terrorizing event that went down at my house, of which I haven't gone into the details because they take 2.5 hours to talk about, ended when one good cop on the Special Forces unit, whatever it is, special, team in Detroit, heard the call, was fucking tired of hearing my address, come over, who had been here once before and tried to catch the guy and couldn't, because he just ran into the fucking jungle of underbrush that exists between the blighted houses, so never caught up to him on that day. But that cop, who actually cared, called in the fucking helicopter, called in his squad and his boys, they knocked the fucking door off the house, 30 seconds, they're in. 30 seconds later, my assailant, David Lee Woodfork, is on the porch. 30 seconds after that, he's in a patrol car. He's taken away. He's put in jail, and he's kept in jail from that moment on. One officer just did the fucking job, which means other officers could just fucking do the job, but they have to have the balls. And it's a lot of balls to ask for someone to have when they're completely unfunded and unsupported by the government that's supposedly standing behind them. But some people do have those balls, and thank God one of them did. Because otherwise, I was going to kill a man, and I probably would have been not prosecuted. Even if I shot him in the fucking back in the middle of the streets, people would have looked at the record and gone, fuck it, let's make this one disappear as much as we make the other ones disappear. But, if but not for one good cop, I would have, had to kill somebody. And despite the fact that I didn't have to kill somebody, I had to psychologically prepare myself to kill somebody. I went through a scenario in my mind over and over again so that, see him, gun comes up, butt into the armpit, it's a shotgun, so snap it up, boom, 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 pull, pump, pull, twice. Do not stop shooting. Make sure he's fucking dead, because this problem has to end, and it can't be ended by calling the police, and it can't be ended by calling the Office of the Chief Investigator, and it can't be ended by calling the Internal Affairs Office, and it can't be ended by calling 911. So what it can be ended by is 5 9mm rounds packed into one shotgun shell, called a double-aught fucking shell, blasting through this motherfucker's chest. And that's the position they put me in. And they want me to pay taxes. And they want me to pay an extra $100 worth of taxes that I don't find in the code they're entitled to. And they want me to pay interest on the penalty fee. And they want me to pay interest on the other penalty fee. It's 2 penalty fees, by the way. The you didn't pay us on time penalty fee and the deficiency penalty fee, which is either interest, in which case they can't charge interest on interest with the deficiency interest penalty, or it is it's either the continuing debt of, it's either the interest or it's got to be the penalty fee, in which case the underpaid estimates penalty, what the fuck is that? Which is what the nature of my letter is getting at here, is I don't know what you're talking about, because you seem to have two penalty fees that both operate on the same principle, or are competing in each other in a way that they can't both do what they're both doing at once. The fuck is going on when I live in a city where I can't get the cops to come, you know? I get my trash picked up. I put a fucking letter back to the city of Detroit in my mailbox in the city of Detroit, and it takes them 2 days to pick it up. Because I got the flag up on my mailbox, but if they don't have something to drop off, I'm not going to walk all the way over there and pick up mail. That's just my federal duty. But it's Detroit, so who gives a shit? You know, it's mostly black people down here, so who gives a shit about their welfare? It's mostly poor people down here, so who gives a shit about poor people's welfare? That's where we stand. They want extra money, and I'm just asking, why should I pay you in the first place? I'm willing to pay you what we agree that I owe you, and I don't even know why, really. Just, I guess, you know, I want to see some of the money get into the government, and then maybe I'll get lucky, and this year you won't steal $500,000 or $250,000 of it away from kids in order to fund the building of another fucking, you know, fun time zone, another, you know, giant ball pit for full-grown adult yuppie white-collar workers in Oakland County to drive into Detroit to have a little fun and get a little drunk for ridiculous amounts of money. Maybe you won't do that this year. Maybe some of what I actually give in taxes will go to something worthwhile. Maybe that's why I'm paying, or why I'd be willing to pay. But if you want to tack on an extra $100 and some worth of charges that I don't see anywhere in the tax code and that make no fucking sense from any legal standpoint, interest on interest and shit like this, maybe just no. Maybe just fuck it. If you're not going to do anything, like at this point, I've put enough money in, you should have done something. You haven't done anything. So, you know, now I'm going to withhold until you do something. How does that sound? Sound fair? Sound the way that it works, you know, if you're renting from someone, you know, you're in a rental complex situation and you pay them and, you know, you tell them the fucking faucet is leaking all over the floor and it's molding and it's rotting and I need you to come in and fix it. And they say, okay, get us this month's thing and then we'll come in. Then you get them this month's thing. They don't come in. Then you call them next month and say, hey, it's still leaking. Still, you know, it's fucking turning black mold in here. You get these guys in and they say, okay, well, just pay us this month. And then you pay them that month and then next month and they still haven't come in. At that point, legally, as a renter, you have the right to just say, I'm not paying you until you fix it. You put the money aside and wait until they fix it. So, I'm a renter in the city of Detroit. I mean, I own my land, but you only ever own anything in this country in a theoretical sense. I rent my land from the county of Wayne, the city of Detroit. What if I just withhold my payment until, I don't know, justice exists in the streets of Detroit? And you'd say, well, how are we supposed to afford it if you don't pay us? And I'd say, well, how are you supposed to afford it if what I pay you, you spend on fucking champagne for white-collar yuppies? And giving your cousins and shit the contract deals there, city council. City council. Pawn, would you have hidden the body or called the cops again? I would have called the cops. I would have called the cops. Yeah, I probably called the cops. Absolutely. Would have called them. Maybe I would have made their job easier if I had to shoot him in the back, you know, turn him over. Maybe they can, I mean, if there were a investigation and medical autopsy and stuff, they'd see that, you know, the gunshot came in at one side and went out the other. But when you're in a situation like that, and considering how loosely the justice system operates in Detroit, they probably would have looked at me, looked at the scenario, looked at the log of events and gone, yeah, I don't see any reason to further investigate this. If anything, people in this city would say that I'm stupid for not having killed him earlier. I mean, honestly, that was the kind of overtone that the police gave to me when I was sitting in the hall outside of the courtroom getting ready to testify, and I was sitting next to the police officers who actually finally did the arrest and got it done, the two who actually fucking made it work. You know, I told them, thank God you guys came by because I had the shotgun locked and loaded and ready to go, and he was circling the house, so couple more minutes and somebody would have been dead. And he said, well, if you would have, I don't think you would have spent a night in jail. That's what the cop told me. And he's right. And he's absolutely right. And that's how justice works in this city. It really, truly is left to the citizens, and the police are just out there trying to enact like a mock justice on top of the justice, which means, sure, somebody might have done something that's illegal, but they did our jobs, or they did it for a good reason, so let's just make the paperwork disappear. That's the way that things work here, because they have to, because we don't have enough police. We got 2,000 police patrolling 130 square miles. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. Just staged an armed revolt. Declare your house an independent state. Didn't work out for Peter Griffin, did it? Who's done this? Probably Homer, probably everybody's done it. The Simpsons did it. Detroit's entire police force was outshined by those two guys, yeah. And it really was just the one guy who, like, led the assault. He caught it, and he decided to bring it in, and then his team showed up, and his team did the job that his team does. But the real, like, job that needed to be done for a week was for someone to fucking show up, and he was the guy who showed up. And he showed up ready, you know? He didn't show up fucking half stoned, which is how the first guys who came to my house, look, two cops, you know, step out of their vehicle, and their uniforms are all, like, and their eyes are kind of like half open kind of thing. What seems to be his problems? Or they didn't slur their words, but they gave off the, either they were incredibly tired or they were high. And they didn't like, they came to my house and I said, he's over there in the house and, you know, and well, I need the details. And I gave him the brief details and he wanted more. And I'm like, he's over there. He's going to run if we sit here talking. And, you know, they were basically buying themselves time for other people to show up before they'd approach the house. Because of the wonderful ass he was, because David Lee Woodfork was a dangerous man. And they didn't want to have to deal with him alone, just the two of them, both with pistols on their belts. So they didn't want to approach until there was backup. And then when they left that night, leaving him on the streets, what they hadn't considered is that now I solely am the sheriff of my street in Detroit. And now I, without backup and without a pistol on my side, have to deal with this violent criminal animal that you didn't want to have to deal with. Or maybe they did realize that, and, you know, they just had confidence that I'd take care of it for them. I don't know. I don't know how you can twist this story to where it's not a horror and horrible and amazing that it happened and never should have happened and I should be rich. You know, I should be $500,000 minimum right now based on the lawsuit that I've brought against the city of Detroit. Sadly, we also exist in a country and in a time in the legal system where just months before this event took place, a ruling came down from the U.S. Supreme Court that basically left every lawyer in the country with the impression that you can't sue a police department for something that they didn't do. I believe the details of that case were a woman had a restraining order against her husband. Her husband violated the restraining order multiple times. Police did not do anything about it. You know, even though she called them in, they'd come in, and they just didn't do anything. They never upheld the restraining order that she'd filed. And then one day, her husband came by and murdered her. And so her surviving, you know, children and family members sued the police department in the city, and the U.S. Supreme Court decided that the police department cannot be sued for what they don't do. They can be sued for when they do something that's racist or that's, you know, horrible, something like that. They can't be sued for not doing their jobs, is what they determined. And in this instance, in my instance, I still have a case, if you ask me, of course, because I want a case. But I still have a case because they did things. They didn't not do things. They did things. They left active, like, scenes. They left criminals on the street. They didn't not show up. They didn't not pursue. They were there. They were 6 feet from the guy with the fucking handcuffs to put on him, and they left. In addition, they caught him, and then they released him because they didn't file paperwork. There are a number of things that they did in addition to the things that they didn't do, all of which show a, massive amount of negligence that is responsible negligence. It's criminal negligence. What happened is now your fault. You could have and you didn't. You should have and you didn't. It was your job to and you didn't. Also, it was your job to and you did the wrong way. That's all there. But because of that Supreme Court ruling, I can't find a lawyer who will take the case because they don't want to have to make that argument. And also because, the lawyer would have to work on spec. It'd have to be pro bono. They get paid when I get paid. They get paid on the settlement that I get. And trying to find someone who's willing to do that. This, by the way, when I told the prosecutor's office, because I had to come in and tell the prosecutor's office, my story, and then that went into the record, and I had to go into court and sit there for the pre-trial thing where the defense got to, voir dire me. Is that how you call it? Got to question me and that kind of stuff. When I sat in her office for like over an hour, telling her this story, the prosecutor who listened anyway, different prosecutors do different jobs in the city of Detroit, but the prosecutor who was there to hear my story and take note of it, when I got done, she said, "That is the worst I've ever heard." And the implication is that she hears a lot of horrible fucking stories about what happened with Detroit police and what didn't happen with Detroit police, and she told me, that is the worst I have ever heard. And I can't find a lawyer to take the case. It happened in 2016. It's now been 3 years. I looked. The other thing is that after an event like this, you just want it to be over. So first you spend a couple of months where you're just like trying to like beat down the doors and make justice happen, and you're phoning internal affairs, and you're writing letters to the office of the chief investigator, and you're calling people and writing emails to fucking news agencies trying to explain it and trying to get people to cover the story, and this information needs to be out there, and then you don't get a response and you don't get a reply, and the offices that are supposed to respond, that are supposed to like make sure that this shit doesn't happen, don't care. And you get to the point where it's like, I just need this to be over. And so you stop. And then time passes and you go looking for a lawyer to try and like get some justice done. And then you contact a bunch of law offices, and the responses that you get are, "We'll listen to your story for $120 an hour if you'd like to come in and tell it. And then we'll decide whether we want to take the case." Or we don't take cases like that. The ACLU I contacted, they didn't want it. A couple of lawyers, one lawyer in particular who like actually listened to some portion of the story, says, I don't feel confident like going into court on this because of that Supreme Court ruling. And so like he was very apologetic, but he didn't want to take the case. And it's like, yeah, I've been wronged. They owe me. This would be the method by which, if you sue, the story gets out, it gets talked about, I get remuneration. On their ledger, they've lost money due to this thing in a significant amount, which means maybe next year they put the money that they spent on my case paying me off into, having a better funded police department so they don't have to pay another one like me. That's how things get corrected and get changed, theoretically. Now, in this city, probably nothing would change, but I'd be $500,000 richer, so I'm pretty for it. They owe it to me. But I can't find anybody to take the case. And that's what the city of Detroit, that whole story encompasses what it is to live in this city. You don't count. You don't count because you live in Detroit. You're a poor person living in Detroit. You live in Detroit and you don't live downtown in a high rise or on, Woodward Avenue itself. You are actually a resident, a local citizen, so you don't count. When the police come, you don't matter. It's not our job to protect you. When you call AI or IA, Internal Affairs, you don't matter. They did their job. When you call Office of the Chief Investigator, we'll get back to you, and then you get a letter that says this matter was resolved internally by. Then you call police or the ACLU, and they say that's just not the kind of case that we'd like to take. Civil Liberties Union, we're not interested in the idea of your civil liberties being violated by police refusing to protect you on multiple nights and then not doing their jobs all of a sudden. No. And then you contact private lawyers and they go, I just don't have like monetary incentive, and there's too much risk that I'd take on, so I don't want to do it. So, that's it. That's what living in Detroit is. You don't matter. You can't get out. There are no opportunities. Your fucking schools, we're taking money out of them to fund the hockey rink for the billionaire, to help pay for what the billionaire can pay for himself. We'll take it away from kids. Why? Because they're kids in Detroit. So they don't care. They don't matter. We don't need to educate them. They're not entitled to that. The damn entitlements, these fucking children in the streets of Detroit, poor community, still trying to recover from, not only slavery, but hundreds of years of fucking discrimination based on color, what you could do, like equality, even on paper didn't exist for black American citizens until 50 years ago or so. Weren't even actually equal just on paper, let alone societally and how you were treated and that kind of a thing. Still recovering from that. It's no big deal. Those kids, they're poor, they're in Detroit, they don't matter. Detroit doesn't matter. Flint's kids don't matter. If you're poor and black, that's a double strike against you. Really, the problems of Detroit, though, are classist problems. It's. I'm not going to say it's not about racism. I'm not going to say that that people with darker skin don't inherently get treated as less thans, because they do. But it is fundamentally a problem of income. If you have income, then the color of your skin doesn't matter as much. Sometimes not at all. A lot of the times not at all, if you've got money. When you don't have money, then you don't matter to start with. If you don't have money and you're black, and you're Hispanic, and you're just non-white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, your problems are not our problems, is the mindset of the people who are in charge and who have the power and who could do something about it. Your problems are your problems. You need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get some money so that I will pretend to give a shit about you. Because right now, I have no incentive to give a shit about you, and I have no morality or common human decency in my bones, which means, unless there is a monetary incentive for me to care, then I don't. Capitalism, yay. Let's just unrestrict all the markets and let it save us all. Because I'm sure that what already is won't get worse when we put things like education into the hands of private agencies. Federal government mandates, state government and local government mandates certain standards for the schools that exist in the city of Detroit. They are bottom performing schools in the nation. They are not meeting those standards. Now imagine a situation where a private entity that is unregulated, that is not mandated to do something, that only has to convince the people that are paying them for the education that the education is good enough for the dollar that they're giving. Imagine how that turns out. The city as a collective cannot, with all of the fucking gambling and casinos and all that income that we were promised that's going to come in, we're going to open the city up to gambling. We're going to give you yet another vice and addiction on these streets. So we're going to build like 4 or 5 casinos on this side of the river. But, okay, the price that we pay in having, creating addicts and just all of the horrible things that come around, gambling, which is not necessarily, I'm not against it. I just know that 10 to 12% of people who, gamble will be to some measure addicted by it. So that's going to happen. But the promise is we'll have the tax dollars to fund the city. Just look out my window real quick. Okay, just dodging some bullets. Apparently that didn't work. But thanks for bringing in gambling too, to go along with the heroin and crack cocaine and everything else that's bouncing around in the city and the violence in the streets and everything. Now we've got gambling as well. But yeah, you can have my tax dollar, sure. Sure. Why not? Why not, says the man. So Let's see. Do you need a lawyer to take them to court, though? Can't you push it yourself? It is... I mean, suing a city is a thing, you know? That's a fucking thing. I just might be able to get myself smart enough to do the things that need to happen, but suing a city, I mean, that's one of the reasons why it's hard to find a lawyer in the first place, is who wants to sue a city? It's hard to do. Suing a city is more about putting pressure on them in the media and letting them know that if we go past this next stage, I'm going to get some friends on Channel 4 Action, whatever, to, take an interest in this case, and then you're going to be watching on the evening news as my client tells a horror story that, went on for over a week. Like, there's a lot of paperwork to be filed. There's a lot of things in suing a city. There is, the rights of the city. Like, if it actually goes to trial, it can easily turn unwinnable. If you really want to win against a city, you better have a really good law team, because cities are protected by a whole bunch of laws that say you can't sue them for this, that, and the other thing. So you got to get someone who's willing to sue a city knowing that we probably can't win, but we can probably blackmail them into a settlement. And that's what I would be looking for. That would be my end goal. But I can't do that on my own. I already tried contacting like media and getting people to take an interest in the story. And the story is so incredible and incredulous. It takes hours to tell it, and then it's kind of unbelievable. And trying to get someone to listen and not tune out because they think they've heard it before, because they think it's just another story of somebody who feels like police harassed them or police didn't do their jobs enough in the city of Detroit. It's hard to get anybody to hear it in the first place, and then you got to get somebody to hear it who would actually be willing to sue a city in the first place, and then you have to get somebody who's... So, yeah, I could take them to small claims, maybe. Probably not. Probably can't file small claims against the city. And then if I did win, it would be, maximum in the state of Michigan would be $5,000, I believe. And that would mean that I could never sue again for anything else, which I guess would be, hey, $5,000 in my pocket. And if I can't find a lawyer, I might as well try for it. But I don't know. I don't know what I could do on my own. I need legal counsel to move forward, but I'm a poor person, which means I don't get legal counsel. And unless I can convince somebody that they'd be able to make money off of it, then this massive injustice just stands, because that is what it is to be poor in America in general, but especially in the still slavery-recovering ghettos, which is where I've chosen to live. The Canadian Mounties are staging at the border, says Jermason. If you want pawn videos, being his own lawyer would take all his time, and there would be no pawn videos. I could go Lenny Bruce on this thing, and just turn my whole life into just being my own lawyer. Do shows just about me. And I'm going to bring up MCL, Michigan Compiled Law 726.131, Section E, subsection 2, where it says, in triplicate... Bring the entire stream to court, says Hologram 1. That would definitely, that would increase exposure. That's another thing. If I get a lawyer to listen long enough, I'd say, what can we do? Can we request the court give us access to have, cameras running?
He asked a poor boy from a poor family spare him his life from this monstrosity.
I want to go after him because nobody's doing anything about it, and nobody cares about it. I mean, you could say that they care about it, but it doesn't matter if you care. I care a lot. It's just we don't have the money. We can't do anything about it. Yes, you can, if you work at it. If you care about it enough to do something, saying, well, we care, but we just can't do anything. No, yeah, you can. Yes, you can. You just have to make decisions to spend money in other places. Hard decisions that may include things like shrinking the size of the city of Detroit, allowing certain more stable areas of the city of Detroit to become their own city so that the 2,000 police that you can afford in the city of Detroit actually have a territory that they can cover. And even if you did reduce it, 2,000 still probably isn't enough. But that's where you'd have to start with this. And it's like, these ideas are the ideas that need, thought about, cared about, and handled. And stories like mine are happening, not necessarily as bad as mine, since the prosecutor said it was the worst she'd ever heard, but stories similar to mine and more gruesome, if not more filled with police incompetence and negligence. More gruesome stories are happening every single night across the streets of Detroit. But the people in charge don't care about those stories and don't care about those people enough to do what needs to be done, to really go at it. Clearly. And my evidence is, look outside. You say, but no, we care. We're trying really hard. You're not trying hard enough. You're not thinking enough outside the box. Maybe because when you go home at the end of the day, you go home to a nice, safe house. Maybe it's in Detroit. Maybe it's not. But you go home to a nice, safe house that's really nice inside, and it's just affluent and wealthy, and the hookers don't come to your door knocking and asking this, that, the other thing. Your neighbors don't run across the street and, saying I just threw myself through a plate glass window to escape my boyfriend who's beating me, who's a felon, and he's crazy, and he's going to come and break all the windows of your house out now because you tried to do the right thing, but when you called 911, nobody came, and so he realized that he could do anything because the police are never going to fucking come. Like, this... You don't experience that side of Detroit, so it doesn't exist. Out of sight, out of mind. We'll just keep worrying about the potholes and the trash collection. And that'll be enough, Here's an idea for what the city of Detroit could do. Take the money that you were going to spend on the next fucking stadium and hand out guns. If it's going to be the Wild West, make it the Wild West. Buy just handguns. $180 a pop. You can get a cheap handgun, $180 a pop, hand everybody a small box of 9mm rounds, 9mm handgun, and just like have an open day. Everybody come get your guns, because the police force is inadequate, underfunded, can't do anything. 911, when you call them, you might not even pick up. If they do pick up, they might just kind of brush you off, and you'll never hear from the police that night anyway. So if it's going to be the Wild West, here's what we're going to do with your tax dollars. Everybody have a gun, and y'all sort this shit out yourselves. Because that's what it's going to have to be. That's the way it is right now, and it's just that there are people in this city who don't know that. And don't have a gun, and can't afford a gun. So hand out guns. While the rest of the nation is trying to get people on board for the idea of taking weapons off the streets and let's get these guns out of here because people die from them. In Detroit, the best policy I can think of is everybody gets a gun, because we can't afford cops. And it's way cheaper to make a one-time purchase of a pistol for all 600,000 residents of Detroit. 600,000 times $200. You're talking about $12 million? $12 million investment. And then everybody's armed, and you can just say, whatever happens, happens. Our police will continue to do the job that they are able to do now, which is they will clean up after you when you shoot each other. They will show up after the event when it's not dangerous anymore, and they will put toe tags on, and they will log, a brief description that may or may not actually get written down at any point in the record, and they might arrest somebody who they then forget who they are in the morning because the shift changed and they didn't write anything down, and then they're accidentally released, like happened to me. But they'll continue doing that, and, if that guy does get accidentally released 14 hours later, you'll have a pistol provided by the city of Detroit that you can just shoot him in the head with, and then we'll come out and we'll put a toe tag on him, and maybe we'll prosecute you for it. Probably won't, though. Because, that's a lot of time, paperwork. We don't have a lot of money around here. I think it's the best policy for the city of Detroit. Everybody gets a gun. I mean, either that or, fixing what's broken. But I just don't see that happening, so everybody gets a gun. Good idea? There are less police, more janitors, is hologram one. Yeah. Justice janitors. Yeah, the Justice Janitors of Detroit. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. That's almost like It's like a comic book waiting to happen, isn't it? Justice janitors. Ba-da-da-da. We don't stop crime. We just log that it happened. Ba-da-da-da. Justice janitors coming this fall to Fox Television. I thought we were given guns when we were born. No, that's just the men, and it's a penis. It does shoot, but it's not. It can be dangerous and deadly, but it's a different thing. It's a different thing. Don't be ashamed though. Men in general confuse dicks and penises and guns all the time, so it's nothing to be ashamed of. We all do it. Justice janitors would be a bunch of janitors going vigilante. I mean, that's the other option for Detroit is just vigilante justice, you know. We get a small group of literal superheroes, you know. No powers or anything, just average people, but who've decided, fuck it, put on masks, go out at night, and start torching all the drug houses that are known that the police won't actually do anything about, and shooting down anybody in the streets who's, you know, being violent or just yelling or just looks a certain way. Since, I mean, you know, police around here, that's how they operate, right? It's kind of, you know, if there's any kids driving a four-wheeler down the street, you know, erratically and dangerously, just shoot him with a taser. Yeah, he's going to fall off it at 35 miles per hour and die. Fuck him. He's a black kid in Detroit, you know? He's driving a four-wheeler. He knew the risks. He knew that it was possible that somebody would come along and tase him to death. When he was born, he knew. He knew those risks, and he took them himself. Damn it. When he was born, he had the option of not being born in Detroit, where there isn't any justice and there isn't any police force, and you just learn to just survive, and you learn that the police can't do anything anyway, and they're not going to do anything, they don't want to do anything. He knew. He chose. But one, I didn't want my gun when I was born. It doesn't matter. They're it's obligatory. If you live in this city, you just get one. But now that I'm stuck with my dick gun, people assume I'm going to be a gun and shoot people. Now you know what it's like to be poor and black in the streets of Detroit. Poor black man in particular. He's got a gun. No, that's his dick. Same difference. It's too long. Kill him. Longer than mine. I'm a white cop for the 11th precinct. I barely have one. They can form a new government more equal than the current. More equal. The Dark Pawn fights for justice in the D City. Maybe. No, like, I'm CFS'd out, and I'm too, cowardly. Not that I'm coward. I just don't want to have to kill somebody. I've been really trying to get through this life without having to kill anybody. I feel like I've had a lot of lives before where I've killed people. I'm just trying to get through this one, hands clean, and goddamn it, they're making it really fucking hard. But, I have definitely thought about creating small incendiary devices and just lighting up certain buildings, and not so much the bombed out drug house buildings as the governmental institution. Sorry, I didn't finish that sentence, so I guess you can't prosecute me for it. I just kind of cut myself off there. But what I was talking about was arson against governmental agencies. Because, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Lithium battery. Lithium battery has so much energy packed into it. You don't even have to overcharge it, but if you overcharged it a little bit, and then you created a circuit, just so, especially if it were a circuit that had like an actual physical, like maybe a motor that would turn, it's not a timer, and the motor turns, and there's like a drill bit, and you've already drilled mostly through the battery, and then like it hits a timer event, and it twists through it, and then it, pops open, and it's got kilowatts of energy stored within it at that point, and it just shoots out fucking plasma, and then you just put that inside a toilet paper roll. Just tape it down on the inside of one side of the toilet paper roll, and then it'll just jet plasma out, and it'll fire like a rocket. It'll fire the fucking toilet paper roll across the room, and then you'll have this flying comet of fire bouncing around the room that's lighting, because it's toilet paper, so it's just gonna catch, and then boom, right? You don't even have to be there. You plant that thing days ahead of time. All you need is a little fucking Adafruit, little raspberry, not even Raspberry Pi kind of thing, little microcontroller on a chip attached to a lithium battery, and the power that's used to actually break the battery open is the battery itself. So it's a beautiful, contained, one-stop arson device, man. You just drop it anywhere, and a couple hours later, days later, however you want to set the timer, you know, not non-explosive either, just sets a fire, which means that people will be able to get out, right? Set it so that it goes off in the middle of the night so that the people who will have to get out would be like janitorial staff. I'm not saying I've thought this through much. It's just easy to conceive of, you know, it just kind of comes to me. AA hand grenades. You could TP the 11th Precinct building. Certain places that apparently the problem isn't theirs, you know, and that's the thing. That's the reason why you have terrorism, as we were talking about earlier, and that's the reason why you would have, homegrown guerrilla warfare in the streets kind of events, like I'm totally not describing. That's not what I'm talking about. But if someone were talking about them, the reason you'd have them is because what you need to do is you need to bring the problems that exist for everyone else in the city into the green zone, into the places and the offices and the homes of the people who decide what happens in the city. Because so long as your problems aren't their problems, why would they give a fuck? I am the Ronin Paul, and I know you're going to complain that it's a short stream, but, I've said all the things that I could possibly say about this. I wanted to read that notice to the city of Detroit for you, and because of this, it's brought back to mind the whole thing with David Lee Woodfork and everything, and just what the city of Detroit owes me, and what it owes the rest of the citizens of Detroit that we're probably none of us ever going to get. But I've said all that I have to say on the subject, including a little bit about the nature of existence, time, and how the universe will end, so I think we've pretty much covered all the bases. I hope to see you back here this Friday at around 4 p.m. Eastern if I wake up for it. On out!